We've learned a couple of new skills in this section, and now it's time for you to put them to use. The first task is to place the block we created in the last video. You may place it in the first sidebar. Restrict the visibility to only the product content types. Now you will work with aquifer pieces of content. So ensure that you have actually created some. Use the Views wizard to create a project that is responsible for displaying aquifers. Show only the aquifer pieces of content. Create a page with the page title of Aquifer Listing and a path of Aquifer-Listing. Create a block with a block title of Aquifer Listing and elect to use a pager. Change the format to Show Fields and apply the change to all displays. You may accept the default row style option. Update the title field so that it does not link to the content and make the change only for the page display. Add the aquifer coordinates, aquifer status, and aquifer volume fields. For each one, expand the rewrite results field set and check the box to override the output of the field with custom text. Give a label followed by a colon, leave a space, and then use the appropriate replacement pattern to display the field, not its raw value. Change the sort criteria to use the title in ascending order for all displays. Save your work and then click the block display. The only thing we will change here is to give the block name a more meaningful value. Save your work again and then feel free to place the block somewhere on the site. The product listing view we created earlier in this section shows the teaser view of our products. View that listing and take note that the only information displayed is the title. Update the product teaser display. Place the product description above the links and hide the label. If we make selections to filter our product listing that results in no products being chosen, we just see empty space below the filters. Update the product listing view to add no results behavior. Choose the text area. Place there were no products that matched your selection in the content. If you filter by the use case developing world in the product listing, you will see your no results message. However, the Drupal is suitable for use in the developing world. Update the Drupal product so that it includes the developing world term. This section has been relatively short, but that doesn't mean we haven't learned a lot. We got our first introduction to the Views wizard. We used Views projects to define different types of displays we want to make available on the site. We created an exposed filter to allow users to narrow down their search results. We used contextual filters and relationships to allow a block to display relevant content. And we refined our site configuration to better reflect what we want displayed and how we want it displayed. In the next section, we will begin to use some contributed modules. To this point in the course, we have been using only the modules that come installed with Drupal. In this section, we are going to begin exploring contributed modules. We are going to look at Drupal's file structure, path auto, color box, and the video embed field. In this video, we will examine Drupal's file structure. We will look at the organization of the directories, following best practices for the modules and themes directories, and using the sites directory. Let's start out by looking at the root directory of our Drupal installation. One point to note immediately is that there is a core directory. That's where almost everything that ships with Drupal goes. There are a few files that we do see located in the root directory itself that also ship with Drupal core. We can take a look inside the core directory and see that it contains the modules and themes directories. All of Drupal 8 core modules and themes go in these directories. Just for curiosity's sake, let's look at what's inside of the modules directory and what's inside of the themes directory. Now let's head back to our root directory and recall that there is a modules subdirectory and a themes subdirectory there. We use these directories for contributed and custom modules and themes. If we look inside the modules directory, there's a README file, which explains the very same things we are learning about right now. The sites directory also contains a README file that explains the purpose of that directory, as well as the new best practice for organizing our modules and themes. This directory is used for single site or multi-site configuration. We are running a single site setup in this course. Let's take a look inside sites default files. We see a number of directories which are used for things like configuration, aggregation, compiled objects, and uploaded content. The site's directory is still an important part of Drupal. We can finish up our exploration of the directory structure by implementing a Drupal best practice. Create a contrib directory and a custom directory under the modules directory, and create a contrib directory and a custom directory under the themes directory as well. Excellent! We are setting ourselves up for success. In the next video, we will download our first contributed modules. Now that we know where we are supposed to place contributed modules, we are going to use our first contributed module, Path Auto. To this point, we have been manually entering aliases for our pieces of content and having to remember the pattern that we want to use for each alias. Path Auto gives us an automated way of handling our aliases. In this video, we are going to look at enabling Path Auto and its dependencies and configuring alias patterns for the product content type. Use any method of your choosing to download the Path Auto module to the modules/contrib folder. You can refer to the appendix section to learn more about your options. Path Auto requires the chaos tools and token contributed modules. We can see that requirement at the project page at https://www.drupal.org/project/path-auto. Not all modules remember to list the requirements on their project page, though. Another way we can figure out Path Auto's dependencies is to navigate through Manage, Extend, and then filter on Path Auto. When we expand the field set, we see the requirements. And if we wanted to use our amazing developer skills, we could look at the pathauto.info.yml file. No matter how we found out about those requirements, we will download the chaos tools and token contributed modules to the modules/contrib folder. Great! Now we've got everything we need to enable Path Auto. And select chaos tools, Path Auto, and token, and then click the install button. We need to define our alias patterns. Navigate through Manage Configuration.
Aqueles modelos é para fazer, não sei o que é que eles fazem para aquela, não sei. É tipo para definir caminhos para os conteúdos criados.
We will be adding content pattern types. Start out by setting the pattern to the literal string product / and then click the link to browse the available tokens. Expand the nodes option and drill down into node:title. Check the product content type. Assign the label product path aliases in English. Later in the course, we will be expanding the site to include multilingual functionality, and it will be nice to have our label and machine name reflect the correct information. Let's regenerate the aliases for our pieces of content. Click the Delete Aliases tab. Choose to delete content aliases and uncheck Only Delete Automatically Generated Aliases. This will delete the aliases we have assigned for our basic page and book page pieces of content. Don't worry though, you will address that issue in the student exercise in this section. Click the Delete Aliases Now button, click the Bulk Generate tab, and select the content type. Finish up by clicking the Update button. Wonderful! Now we can let Path Auto take care of creating our path aliases. The next contributed module we will look at is Colorbox. In the last video, we looked at Path Auto, which can be considered a utility module. Colorbox is a module that will add some visual appeal to our site. In this video, we are going to look at enabling Colorbox, installing the necessary third-party library, and managing display to present an image gallery. Let's head over to the project page for Colorbox at https://www.drupal.org/project/colorbox. Scroll down the page to the dependencies section and note that we must download a plugin library. We will need to create the libraries directory in our Drupal root. Also notice that there is a drush command we can use once we have installed Colorbox that will download the library into the correct place for us. This command would also create the libraries directory if it didn't already exist. Whatever method we choose to use to download Colorbox in its library, we should end up with the Colorbox module inside of the modules/contrib directory and the plugin inside of the libraries directory. The Colorbox plugin library comes with more than we really need. The only necessary piece is the jQuery.colorbox-min.js file. Make sure to enable Colorbox. Also, check the status report to ensure that Colorbox is able to find the necessary plugin. Now that all the pieces are in place for us to use Colorbox, we can navigate through Manage, Structure, Content Types, and choose to manage display for the product content type. Instead of displaying our product image as an image, we are going to select the Colorbox formatter. Next, we will click the gear icon so that we can configure things to our liking. Use our product thumbnail preset for the image style for the content. Select our product large preset for the image style for Colorbox. The per post gallery is exactly what we need. So let's update our configuration changes and then save them. How about if we have a look at our gallery? Return to the site and click the Products tab. Then select one of our listed products. When we click a thumbnail, we see our gallery in action. Cool! Something that will be even cooler is when we integrate the video embed field with Colorbox in the next video. In the last video, we set up Colorbox. In this video, we are going to use video embed field in conjunction with Colorbox. We are going to look at enabling video embed field, adding a video field to the book content type, managing the display of book pages. Video embed field has no dependencies on other contributed modules. We can simply download it to our modules/contrib directory. Remember to enable the module. Next, we can navigate through Manage, Structure, Content Types, and select Manage Fields for the book page content type. Add a video embed field and name it Related Video. Choose whatever you like for the allowed number of values. For this course, we will use only the YouTube provider. Click the Manage Display tab. We don't want this field to be displayed when looking at book pages because we are going to create a block with views. So drag the field to the disabled area and click the Save button. Choose any video from YouTube that you like and copy the URL for it. Choose a book page piece of content and paste the URL into the related video text field. It's time for you to learn about your next student exercise.
Basicamente módulo para criar galerias e módulo que adiciona um campo, que é vídeo.
In the previous videos in this section, we worked with some contributed modules, which gave us additional functionality. In this video, we will cover your student exercise to use that new functionality. We will look at adding an automatic path alias for basic adding an automatic path alias for book page. In the last section, we looked at some contributed modules. In this section, we are going to return to some core functionality, the Tor module and its API. This section will cover what is a Tor, creating a Tor, and creating a block to give access to a Tor. In this video, we will look at how Tors are named, where Tors are located, what Tors ship with core, and what a Tor looks like. Modules make Tors available by creating a file of the format tor.tor.torid.yml. Let's take a look at what Tor files are available with core. I'm using the find utility to search for file names that start with tor.tor. Besides some results for testing Tors, we see that there are currently 5 Tors that ship with core. All of them are located inside the module name /config/optional directory. There is a tour for the locale module, 3 tours for the language module, and 1 tour for the views user interface. The tour module should already be installed by the standard installation profile. Let's enable the language module by navigating through Manage, Extend, and filtering on language. Check the box for the language module and click the Install button. Then navigate through Manage, Help, and scroll down the page to the Tours section. Click on the Adding Languages link. Start the tour by clicking the tour link in the toolbar. We are presented the first of 3 panes in the tour. This pane has a title of Adding Languages. It is presented as a simple modal with plain text. When we click the next button, we are taken to the second pane of the tour. This pane has a title of Select Language. It is attached below the language name dropdown. The third and final pane has a title of Continuing On. It is presented as a simple modal. If we hover our mouse over the third bullet point, we will see that it is a clickable link. It is possible to include HTML markup in our tours. You may leave the language module enabled, as we will need it later in the course when we look at making our site multilingual. Now that we've seen what a tour looks like, we will continue to the next video to learn how to create our own tour. In the last video, we saw that tours provide a good way to help users understand how to use our website. In this video, we will learn how to create our own tours. We will look at specifying where our tour will display, specifying targets for our tour tips, and creating our YAML file. To specify where a tour will display, we use a route name. Let's take a look at the route name that the Adding Languages tour used. It used language.add. Looking at the language.routing.yml file, we see that language.add corresponds to the path /admin/config/regional/language/add. We'll return to the routing YAML file later in the course. In our case, we are going to create a tour of our product guides, which happen to be books. Each book page is a node on the site. Therefore, we want to display our tour when we are viewing nodes of type book page. Unfortunately, there isn't a route name specifically for that. I needed to examine the router table in the database to determine that our route name is entity.node.canonical. We are going to attach some of our tour panes to fields that are displayed on book pages. We need to inspect the page so that we can find IDs or classes that we can target. When we do so for our book pages, we will find that the best we can do is to target certain classes. For example, one of our panes will target the node-type-book class for the article tag. Let's create our YAML file for the tour now. First, we will create the IAI_product_guide directory inside of the modules/custom directory. We will need an enable.yml file so that we can enable our custom module. All of the keys except for package and dependencies are required.
Pronto, é melhor explicar isto é como no tema, estás a ver, tens o fecheiro YML, que é a informação sobre o que lá vais meter. Isto são os campos que são obrigatórios: nome, descrição. O package é tipo, é o sítio onde vai aparecer aqui. Sim. Já viste, tipo, aqueles tipos, tal, custom, blá blá blá, tipo,
There is no sense enabling this custom module if the books module is not enabled, so we have specified the book module as a dependency. Next, we will create the config/optional directory. We will name our file tour.tour.iai-product-guide.yml. Here is an explanation of the information in our YAML file. The highlighted area is showing the global information. This tour is meant for the English language. It is enabled for use. We want this tour to be dependent on the fact that our custom module is enabled. As we discussed in the previous video, The pattern to name a Tor YAML file is tor.tor.tor-id.yml. We have named this Tor tor.tor.iai-product-guide.yml. Therefore, our ID is iai-product-guide. We can label our Tor any way we want. It's for informational purposes only. The module key must correspond to the machine name we have assigned our module. Since we named our info YAML file iai_product_guide.info.yml, our machine name is iai_product_guide. Finally, we specify on what routes our Tor will be available. It is possible to specify more than one route name if we desire. Now we will look at defining the contents of the Tor. The Tor is composed of tips. Each tip is contained inside its own key. Our Tor has 5 panes. The first pane is the introduction pane. Every pane needs a unique ID. All of our panes will use the text plugin type, which is what we saw when we looked at the Tors provided by Core. It is possible to define new plugin types that the Tor module can use. We won't be writing any plugins for the Tor module in this course. You can learn more about plugins in the appendix section. Additionally, we will be writing some different plugins other than Tor plugin types later on in the course. The label key specifies the title of the pane. The body key specifies the text that will appear in that pane. Remember that we can put HTML in the body. The weight specifies in what order the tip will appear. It is possible to specify negative weights if we needed to have our tips appear before the tips of another Tor that appears at the same route as our Tor. Since we haven't specified where to display our tip, it will appear as a simple modal on the page. We can use other keys to place our tip at a specific location on the page. The location key specifies where the pane will appear relative to the target element. We specify the target element by using the attributes key. In our case, we are using the data-class type of attribute. It's also possible to use the data-ID type of attribute. Note that we do not include the preceding period. We would not include the preceding hash for a data ID. We have now provided everything the Tor module needs to be able to display our Tor. In the next video, we will look at making our Tor available to users. In the last video, we created our own Tor. In this video, we will make that Tor available to visitors. We will look at verifying that our Tor is available on the page, setting permission to view Tors, and writing a block plugin to provide a link to our Tor. Navigate to Manage Extend and enable the Instant Aqua International Products Guide module. Since we are signed in as a user with elevated privileges, we will see that the Tor link is available in the toolbar when we view one of our product guidebooks. Things won't work in quite the same way for users without elevated privileges. Navigate through Manage People and click the Permissions tab. Search for Tor on the page. We need to grant permission to access Tors to the appropriate roles, which in our case is the anonymous user. However, in general, we will not grant permission to use the administration toolbar to most users. Therefore, the Tor link in the toolbar won't be available to the anonymous user. That doesn't mean that the Tor is not available on the page, though. If we view a products guide as an anonymous user and view the page source, we will see that the Tor is actually there. We just need a way to make it run. We can find the answer to this question by looking at the JavaScript that the Tor module provides. If we format a link with a query argument of Tor equals 1, then the Tor will start automatically. It's time to create our first custom plugin, a block. Create the source plugin block directory. We are going to name our block Tor link block.php. We start out by specifying our namespace. You can learn more about namespaces in the appendix section on PSR. Next, we have a bunch of use statements. The easiest way to know what statements you need to include is to see what you end up using. You can learn more about use statements in the appendix section on PSR. Drupal uses annotations for all its plugins. You can learn more about annotations and plugins in the appendix. Even though the annotations look like comments in a doc block, they are actually closer to code than comments. Since we are defining a block plugin, we start out our annotation with the @block plugin type declaration. The ID key is what we use to specify a machine name for our block. Every plugin registered with Drupal must have a unique machine name. The admin label and category keys specify information that is displayed in the user interface. The most interesting key we are using for this plugin is the context key. This key makes our block a context-aware plugin. You can learn more about plugin context in the appendix. Our context key is specifying that we want our block to have the node that is being viewed to be available to it. We will access that node with a method later in tour link block class. Since we are defining a block class, we are extending the block base. Additionally, we are implementing the container factory plugin interface so that we can use dependency injection. We immediately get two examples of why we needed two of our use statements. Let's take our first look at dependency injection in action. The container factory plugin interface lets us know that the create method will be available. Since the method is already documented in the interface, we can label our doc block with the @inherit_doc syntax. Symfony will call the create method on our object, passing it a container, among other things. The container is what keeps track of all the services registered with Symfony. We'll look more at services later in the course. The key thing for us to focus on now is that we tell Symfony we want it to pass the current user service to our constructor. When we look at our constructor, we see the current user service being passed as the last argument. You can learn more about Symfony and various topics like the service container and dependency injection in the appendix. Because we are extending the block-based class, we use the build method to define what our block will contain. Here is where we make use of the get context.
O gajo basicamente está a criar bloco. O gajo está a criar aqueles blocos que tu podes passar e tu podes criar aqui dentro. O gajo está a criar bloco novo. Dentro daquela pasta, não sei qual é que é a pasta de plugins, não sei o que mais. Tens que voltar a ver isto. Ou seja, ele para criar bloco, pôs lá aquela cena em cima, aquela arroba, a dizer isto é bloco. E aqui tem um comentário. E estendeu a classe dos blocos e agora está a criar funções para aquilo. Não percebi bem. Acho que ele deve querer dar permissões ao utilizador anónimo para poder ver aquilo que API. Ver o motor API.
Value method to retrieve the node that is being viewed. The rest of the logic is responsible for building a render array. You can learn more about render arrays in the appendix. Do take note that we attached the Tor module's Tor library so that the necessary JavaScript will be included on the page. We will talk more about libraries later in the course. All that remains is to place our block and have a look at our Tor. That sounds like a good exercise for you to do. We have added some code that we must get Drupal to scan. So visit the extend page and then clear cache. Place the block in the first sidebar or any other region of your choosing, configuring the visibility to be restricted to book pages. You may choose to either not display the title or define a title of your liking. With the block in place and with the way we have configured our permissions, you should be able to access the tour of the product guides as an anonymous user. Enjoy! We've accomplished some great new things in this section. We learned about how tours work, we wrote our first custom module to define a tour, and we wrote our first custom plugin to provide a link to our tour. In the next section, we will continue working with custom modules. In the last section, we created our first custom module. In this section, we will create 3 more custom modules. We are going to create a custom module to store all the information about our product content type, create a custom module to store all the information about the aquifer content type, and create a custom module to store all the information about a water eco action content type. In this video, we are going to look at exporting our site configuration, gathering the necessary data from the configuration, and creating our custom module. We have already defined everything we want to store for our product content type. We just need to export that information. Navigate through Manage, Configuration, Configuration Synchronization, and click the Export tab. Click the Export button to export the full archive and save the file. Extract the contents of the compressed file. When we look at the contents of the file, we see that there are a lot of YAML files, which makes it cumbersome to work from the graphical file manager. We are going to use the terminal and the command line to make things easier. Since we were careful to use the word product in all of our configuration, we can search for all the YAML files that have the word product in them. Create the IAI_product directory inside of the module's custom directory. Switch to the IAI product directory and create the config optional directory. We are using config optional instead of config install because we want the flexibility that the config optional directory provides us. When we install a module that defines configuration in the config optional directory, Drupal will define the pieces that have not already been defined on the site. If we used the config install directory, we would get an error when Drupal tries to define pieces that already exist. One important point to note is that another side effect of the config optional directory is that Drupal will still install whatever it can with our module, even if there are dependencies that are missing. Whereas if we used config install, we would receive an error message if we were missing any dependencies. By carefully choosing how we name things, as we have done with the product content type and the rest of its configuration, we should be fine using either approach. Copy all of the necessary YAML files from the configuration by using a wildcard pattern. Let's take a look at what we've got in our config optional directory now. You may be surprised by some of the configuration we have captured. We don't want the block configuration, and we'll delete it. We've got two base field overrides that reflect the choices we made for the promoted to front page option and the label we used to describe the title field. The form display file specifies how the data entry screen appears. The two view display files specify how the product will be displayed to users in the default and teaser view modes. Next, we have a large number of files that specify our fields and how they are stored. The storage definitions are particularly important. Without those definitions, our product content type would not be created properly. We see our two image style presets, and the node type file holds the configuration for some choices we made when editing our content type. We've even got a configuration file for the path alias we defined. The 4 taxonomy files define the 4 vocabularies we have created. However, Drupal does not create configuration files for the terms, as these are considered content. We would have to repopulate the vocabularies ourselves. We won't save the tour file here. It's already part of another module. The last files are the definitions of the views we created. Now you should have a strong appreciation for why we chose to include the product slug in all of our machine names. We've got a small amount of cleanup to do with these configuration files. When we examine each file, we will see that there is a unique universal ID assigned at the top of the file that we need to remove. Make sure to go through all of the configuration files and remove that first line. Let's pull all of this together by creating our IAI_product.info.yml file. We'll start out by completing all the required keys as well as the optional package key. Next, we will add the dependencies, which we can find by examining the YAML files in our configuration directory and looking for their module dependencies. we can now navigate through Manage, Extend, and select our module to enable. In the next video, we will cover your next student exercise.
Fogo. Yeah, foi. Queres quanto para trás?
Eu agora não sei
In
se
the
calhar.
previous video, we covered all.
Se calhar é mais. Não sei.
Queres ver? Vamos ao anterior, em vez de voltar a ver este? Em vez de estarmos a ver este novo? Como quiseres, já.
Vemos o anterior?
Yeah.
Sim.
Devemos tipo aquilo que o gajo estava a dizer, criar o modo. Aqui. Vamos este, tem mais ou menos o mesmo tempo.
In the last section, we created our first custom module. In this section, we will create 3 more custom modules. We are going to create custom module to store all the information about our product content type, create a custom module to store all the information about the aquifer content type, and create a custom module to store all the information about a water eco-caption content type. In this video, we are going to look at exporting our site configuration, gathering the necessary data from the configuration, and creating our custom module. We have already defined everything we want to store for our product content type. We just need to export that information. Navigate through Manage, Configuration, Configuration Synchronization, and click the Export tab. Click the Export button to export the full archive and save the file. Extract the contents of the compressed file. When we look at the contents of the file, we see that there are a lot of YAML files, which makes it cumbersome to work with a graphical file manager. We are going to use the terminal and the command line to make things easier. Since we were careful to
Tu
use the
basicamente saca
word
tudo do site.
product in
O que é
our
configurações?
configuration,
Esta
we
parte,
can
né?
search
Yeah,
for
tem
all
lá
the
tudo.
YAML
Então agora vai procurar pelas
files
coisas
that
que
have
estão relacionadas com o product.
product in them. Create the IAI_product directory inside of the module's custom directory. Switch to the IAI product directory and create the config optional directory. We are using config optional instead of config install because we want the flexibility that the config optional directory provides us. When we install a module that defines configuration in the config optional directory, Drupal will define the pieces that have not already been defined on the site. If we use the config install directory, we would get an error when Drupal tries to define pieces that already exist. One important point to note is that another side effect of the config optional directory is that Drupal will still install whatever it can with our module, even if there are dependencies that are missing. Whereas if we use config install, we would receive an error message if we were missing any dependencies. By carefully choosing how we name things, as we have done with the product content type and the rest of its configuration, we should be fine using either approach. Copy all of the necessary YAML files from the configuration by using the wildcard pattern. Let's take a look at what we've got in our config optional directory now. You may be surprised by some of the configuration we have captured. We don't want the block configuration, and we'll delete it. We've got 2 base field overrides that reflect the choices we made for the promoted to front page option and the label we used to describe the title field. The form display file specifies how the data entry screen appears. The 2 view display files specify how the product will be displayed to users in the default and teaser view modes. Next, we have a large number of files that specify our fields and how they are stored. The storage definitions are particularly important. Without those definitions, our content would not be
Descrição,
created.
imagem, mecanismo,
We see our 2 image style presets, and the node type file holds the configuration for some choices we made when editing our content type. We've even got a configuration file for the path alias we defined. The 4 taxonomy files define the 4 vocabularies we have created. However, Drupal does not create configuration files for the terms, as these are considered content. We would have to repopulate the vocabularies ourselves. We won't save the tour file here. It's already part of another module. The last files are the definitions of the views we created. Now you should have a strong appreciation for why we chose to include the product slug in all of our machine names. We've got a small amount of cleanup to do with these configuration files. When we examine each file, we will see that there is a unique universal ID assigned at the top of the file that we need to remove. Make sure to go through all of the configuration files and remove that first line. Let's pull all of this together by creating our iai_product.info.yml file. We'll start out by completing all the required keys as well as the optional package key. Next, we will add the dependencies, which we can find by examining the YAML files in our configuration directory and looking for their module dependencies. We can now navigate through Manage, Extend, and select our module to enable. In the next video, we will cover your next student exercise. In the previous video, in a prior section, we looked at the Tor API. In this section, we are going to look at the modal API. We will discuss creating a controller to display a page and creating a block that triggers a modal. In this video, we will create our controller. We will look at what we want to accomplish with a modal, how to write a controller, and working with image fields. We've already created book pages that reference products. We manage the display so that those pages don't show the products they reference. What we want to accomplish is that when we view a book page that references a product, a block will appear on the page that provides thumbnails of the product images. If we click a product image thumbnail, it opens a modal with a large version of the product image. The first thing we need to do is to create a controller that generates a page that displays a particular image for a product. We need this page because that is what is going to ultimately be displayed in a modal. We start our controller class with the typical declarations of namespace and use statements. Then we extend the controller-based class. Our class contains just one method, which is responsible for creating our page. Take note that our method expects two arguments. The first argument is the node. By type hinting with the node interface, we are telling Symfony that we want the fully loaded node object. The second argument is the delta for the image. For this pass of this module, we are going to take care of our logic directly in our method, which means that we will be referencing specific field names of our product content type. The end result we will be returning is a render array. You can learn more about render arrays in the appendix. There are two possibilities. The product object contains an image with the specified delta, or it does not. If we find an image, we specify that we want it displayed using the product large image preset. If we do not find an image, we return a notice. We have finished defining our controller, but it won't do anything until we give a way for Drupal to call it. As with our other modules, we will need our
Eu acho que eu fechei a controla dentro da pasta
It
source
is
dentro do
pretty
módulo.
similar to the others we have written. The way we define a path on which to display our page is with a routing YAML file. The first line specifies our route name. As you might guess, the path key specifies the path. Our path contains the placeholder variables node and delta, which correspond to the two arguments that will be passed to our method
Normalmente há uma
that
coisa que eu
defines the page.
percebo.
In the defaults key, we specify the subkeys that let Symfony know which controller and method to use at the path and
Já
what the
posso
page
explicar. Isto é tipo o controller está a dizer o caminho onde ele está. Isto depois estamos a fechar de programação. Isto aqui tem que ter o nome, tem que ter o mesmo nome do fecheiro, o controlador tem o mesmo nome do fecheiro e a função lá dentro tem o mesmo nome.
Sim.
supposed to be.
Mas,
Finally,
Camel,
in the requirements key, we specify the permission to check to see if a user is allowed to view the page. Since we won't be covering writing tests until later in the course, we will now enable our module and make sure that our page does display as we expect. we can test a path name that should display an image. Just remember that we must use zero-based indexes. Let's also check what happens when we request an image that should not exist. Great! Our page displays the way that we want it to. Let's continue to the next video and create our block to trigger the modal display. Supposed to do. Finally,
Como é que o gajo... Ah, ok. Como é que o gajo me chega aquele caminho? Foi aqui pelo path, não é?
Como é que o gajo me chega?
E há aquele caminho, ele escreveu tipo um URL.
Sim.
E ele chegou, foi por aqui, pelo path. E a IP, isto deve ser o nome do... Isto é que é estranho, é a IP. Isto deve ser quando o módulo está ativado. Deixa eu ver como é que ele escreve lá em cima. Não sei se ele escreve.
to check to see if a user is allowed to view the page. Since we won't be covering writing tests until later in the course, we will now enable our module and make sure that our page does display as we expect. We can test a path name that should display an image. Just remember that we must use zero-based indexes. Let's also check what happens when we request an image that should not exist. In the last video, we created our controller. We don't really plan to call it manually though. In this video, we will learn how to create our block to display our page in a mobile. We are going to look at creating a configurable block, triggering the mobile API functionality, and exploring the block functionality. We created our first block in video 4.3. So you already know that we need to place our code inside of source/plugin/block. We are going to create the image gallery block class. As with our Torlink block, we will be creating a context-aware plugin, and our annotation looks very similar to what we saw with that block. Recall that you can learn more about annotations and plugins in the appendix. This block is going to be configurable. In order to accomplish this, there are 3 methods we will use from the block base. Our default configuration method specifies that we will display 5 thumbnails. Our block form method specifies that we will provide a widget which will be a select list that runs from 2 to 20. Our block submit method records the configuration. Once again, we access the node object with the getContextValue method. The key to triggering the modal functionality is to create a URL that has certain options. Specifically, we can look at the options array we have defined. We make use of private methods such as getProduct because we are making certain assumptions about how this block is meant to function. Now that we've got the necessary pieces in place, why don't you explore the functionality? You may need to get Drupal to recognize the block. Visit the modules page and then clear cache. Place our block in a region of your choosing. You don't need to configure the visibility settings. See how the block functions in the following situations. Navigate to one of the user guide pages that references a product that has at least one image attached. Navigate to a product page for a product that has at least one image attached. Navigate to a product page for a product that does not contain any images. Navigate to the About page, and navigate to the product listing view. You might also want to test out creating a book page that does not reference a product, as well as a book page that references a product that has no images attached. When you've had your fill of playing with our mobile functionality, proceed to the next video to learn about your next student exercise.
Para a gente liberar.
Olha, eu esqueci de pôr uma coisa a contar, o relógio. Ou tive que falar.
Eu já
Fizeste? Fiz. Depois tenho que ver pelo tempo. Yeah. Posso?
In the previous two videos, we created a controller and a block. In this video, we will discuss the requirements for a controller you will begin to build. We will look at the namespace for our controller, the methods our controller will use, and the arguments for our methods. In section 5, you began the work of creating a custom module for the aquifer content type. We will have various pages that will display information about aquifers. Begin creating the display aquifers class in the namespace drupal /iai_aquifer/controller. Create 3 public methods that have no logic inside of their curly braces. Get total aquifers, get aquifer names, and get aquifer data. The get total aquifers method accepts the region argument, which will default to all if nothing is passed. The get aquifer data method accepts the aquifer name argument. Include as much detail as you can in the file, given the above information. You will find a solution included in the next section's branch of the repository. In this section, we have looked at creating a controller, creating a configurable block, and setting options on a link to cause Drupal to display the link in a modal. It wasn't necessary for our page to know that it was going to be displayed in a modal. Drupal's modal API took care of stripping out all the rest of the elements that appear in other regions. In the next section, we will look at interfaces and services.
Okay. Sis.
In video 4.3, we got our first look at dependency injection. In this section, we are going to look at how interfaces and services tie into dependency injection. We will cover what an interface is, why using interfaces is critical for dependency injection, what a service is, and how to create a service. In this video, we are going to look at what an interface is, why we should use interfaces, and what an interface looks like. In object-oriented programming, an interface can be thought of as a blueprint or a contract. It specifies the functionality that a class that implements the interface must provide. 2 reasons to use interfaces are the interface serves as useful documentation, and the interface makes dependency injection possible. Let's take a look at an actual interface so that we can see how it serves as documentation. Our aquifer retrieval service interface is going to document what type of data we are expecting to be able to retrieve from an external source. We use the interface keyword to indicate that we are defining an interface. Take note that the vast majority of the contents of the file are the comments in our doc blocks. We never place any logic inside of our methods. Our interface indicates that we expect 3 methods to be available. The first method tells us how many aquifers are in the world, with the option to filter the count by region. The second method will give us a list of the aquifer names, which we can optionally filter by region, choose a number of results to receive, and start at a certain offset. The third method provides us the data on a particular aquifer. The data is comprised of the coordinates, status, and volume. Furthermore, we know the type of detail we will receive for each of those pieces of data. We have just seen how easy it is to use an interface as documentation. This is something that even a non-technical person could reasonably understand. It is not necessary to be able to read the actual implementation of this interface, nor is it necessary to know anything about the external source that provides the desired information. It is entirely possible that the external source doesn't have the exact functionality we want to use or the correct format of the data. It will be the responsibility of the class that implements this interface to take care of all those details. All of that complexity will be hidden inside of that class instead of cluttering up our interface. Additionally, it doesn't matter how the external source changes or if we change what external source we use. The interface still stays the same, and it remains an accurate source of information about what we can expect from the service we write. Let's return to the example of dependency injection we looked at in video 4.3. Note how the constructor method type hints the current user variable with the account interface and how about what we can expect from the service we write. Let's return to the example of dependency injection we looked at in video 4.3. Note how the constructor method type hints the current user variable with the account interface and how the create method type hints the container variable with the container interface. If we type hinted with a specific class, then PHP would accept only an instance of that class to be passed in. We would not have a clean way to substitute a different object for the argument. However, since we are type hinting with an interface, we can pass in an object of any class that implements the interface. In the next video, we will look at how we implemented our interface. In the last video, we defined an interface for our service. In this video, we are going to implement that interface. We are going to look at what a service is, using @inherit_doc to create our doc blocks, and registering our service with Symfony. A service is an object that provides useful functionality to an application. A Drupal best practice is to place our business logic inside of a service so that our controllers can remain relatively clean and simple. We create our class by using the class keyword and indicate that we will comply with the contract specified in our interface by using the implements keyword followed by the interface name. When discussing interfaces, we learned that they serve as a form of documentation. In fact, we leverage the documentation that the interface provides by using the @inherit_doc syntax. There is no need to type the doc block again. The placeholder will be parsed and converted into the text from the interface. We also mentioned that all of the complex logic would remain hidden from the interface. In our case, there really isn't any complex logic at all. In fact, we are hard coding everything. Fortunately, this is not a problem. It provides a really convenient way for us to mock our service and continue writing the rest of our code. Later on, we could either update the service or we could swap in a different service that actually uses an external source. Our service is not available until we register it with Symfony. To do this, we will create the iai_aquifer.services.yml file. The file is quite simple at the moment. We specify
Basicamente, pelo que eu percebi, acho eu, o serviço é que implementa a lógica da interface, não é?
Sim.
Interface. Depois o serviço. Tem as funções.
Mas eu implementa a lógica como assim?
Tipo, as funções que nós queremos utilizar a partir dali. Tipo, anteriormente, o gajo criou tipo, a interface criou tipo criou o nome das funções ou dos métodos, não é? Ir buscar, contar os aquíferos, ir buscar um aquífero pelo nome, etc. Mas isto aqui deve ser mais específico. O serviço que tem. Bem, na verdade, implementa, né? É o que ele diz. Implementa o interface. Como é que o gajo chamou isto de fecheiro?
YML file. The file.
Que é o nome do interface. Não percebi se é o nome do interface ou o nome do módulo.
Era o quê?
Ok, mete o nome do módulo, ponto services.yml. Ok. Isto é para registá-lo no Symfony. Nome do módulo, ponto services. Eu tenho que dar uma grande volta nisto, tenho que voltar a ver isto.
Services.yml file. The file is quite simple at the moment. We specify the services key, inside of which we declare our service. We have assigned an ID, and we have let Symfony know which class to instantiate to provide the service. We will return to more interesting services and this file in the next section. For now, we have gotten a simple introduction. In the next video, we will lay out another student exercise.
Bela banhada.
We've looked at creating an interface and a service. Now it's time for you to create an interface. In this video, we will look at why we need another interface, where we should create our interface, and what our interface should specify. When we created our product image gallery functionality, we naturally needed to retrieve our product images. When we did so, we referenced a specific field name. Even though we have created a custom module to define the product content type, we really don't want to be referencing specific field names in our code. It will be much better to create a service that is responsible for retrieving our product data. Let's follow best practice and first define an interface. That way we are well prepared for the future in the event our field names change or something else changes with our product content type that necessitates retrieving its data in a different fashion. Our interface will still remain the same, and we can just update our service or write an entirely new service that we can swap for our original service. It makes sense to continue our work inside of our IAI_product module. Create the new product manager service interface in the Drupal /IAI_product namespace.
Okay.
At the moment, all we need is the ability to retrieve all the image data for a given product. One could foresee a need in the future to retrieve all the taxonomy data, but we won't address that now. Just define a single public method named retrieve product images that accepts a fully loaded product node. Hint, you will want the method to type hint that it is expecting a node interface. You will write and use the actual service in an upcoming student exercise. Excellent. In this section, we have learned about what interfaces are and why we want to use them, what services are, why we want to use them, and how we register them. In the next section, we will continue writing more custom code to create a fully encapsulated solution within our Aquifer module. In the last section, we got an introduction to interfaces and services. We wrote a mock service. In this section, we are going to create more useful code. We will cover writing a service to provide reusable functionality using Drupal hooks and writing a keyword plugin. In this video, we will look at utilizing an interface and an abstract class and dependency injection with services. While our Aquifer retrieval service doesn't actually utilize an external source to gather data on aquifers, we do want to have a service that allows us to manage our aquifers on the site. We can see that our interface specifies that our service needs to provide methods to read the aquifers on our site and to update aquifers on our site. The thinking is that we will periodically poll the external source to gather the latest information, and then we'll update the information on our site. You may be wondering why we don't have a method to create an aquifer on our site in the first place. Let's have a look at our abstract class to answer that question. Our abstract class defines only one method, a method to create an aquifer. By using an abstract class, we can declare the method protected, and interface only allows public methods. You can read the fairly extensive comments in this abstract class to understand the thinking on this more. Our Aquifer Manager service is where all of our logic resides. We define a class that extends our abstract class and implements our interface. Notice that we have a constructor in this service. We are utilizing dependency injection to allow us to get at node storage so that we can query our database. We will see how we specify the object to be injected later in this video. Our create aquifer method does pretty much what one would expect, and there's not much that needs to be called out specifically. Do take note of the fact that we perform some rudimentary validation of our results. The validate path fields method will throw an exception that terminates our processing if validation fails. The read aquifer method is also unremarkable in what it does and requires no further comment. One thing to point out in the update aquifer method is that it begins by querying to see if the aquifer already exists. If it doesn't, then control will be passed to the create aquifer method. Now we see why we didn't need to provide a public method to create the aquifer. Our class contains a few private utility methods that we have used in other methods. The doc blocks of these methods should make their purpose self-evident. Let's have a look at our service's YAML file and see how we registered this service. We had previously registered the Aquifer Retrieval service. Now we are registering our Aquifer Manager service. Notice that we have added an arguments key. The @ sign tells Symfony that we are requesting another service. The service we are requesting is the Entity Manager service. Symfony injects this service via our services constructor. In the next video, we will write a module that makes use of the Aquifer Retrieval service.
Ok, mas basicamente criou aquela função que está à espera de coisas para mandarmos lá para dentro. Agora quero ver como é que queríamos HTML para mandar para lá.
We created our second service for aquifers. In this video, we are going to put one of our services to use. We are going to look at why we still use .module files, using hooks, and using Drupal's global object to access services. The reason we are still writing some procedural code and still using .module files in Drupal 8 is that Drupal 8 has not fully implemented events, dispatchers, listeners, and subscribers. It is still using some hooks. Both events and hooks are designed so that it's possible to interact at points in the flow of a request. You can learn more about how Symfony handles events by visiting http://symfony.com/doc/current/components/event_dispatcher.html. http://project.html/project/reference/events.html. We will look at our module file now to explore Drupal hooks. Notice that we do have a use statement at the top of our file. Even though we are writing procedural code, we are still able to interact with even though we notice that we do have a HTML.
Ok, criou um fecheiro módulo com Ok, é importante.
You will look at our
Vou dizer,
module file now to
fechar o top
explore
module.
Drupal hooks. Notice that we do have a use statement at the top of our file. Even though we are writing procedural code, we are still able to interact with objects. Our first hook is hook help. Drupal knows how to execute our
Isto isto faz as funções já específicas. Há a função hook help e tu substituis o que diz hook pelo nome do módulo ou pelo nome do tema. Eu não sei o que a função help faz, mas há uma outra não.
the AI aquifer help function because we have named it according to the expected pattern of module name underscore hook name. This function provides the help text the user will see in various places. We specify where the help text appears by matching a particular route name. Our next hook is hook cron. This hook provides a way for tasks to be run periodically. There are two things we want to highlight in our hook cron implementation. We are using the global Drupal object to access services. This class and its methods allow us to work around the fact that there is no dependency injection in procedural code. An example is accessing the state storage service to determine when our cron job last ran. Another example is retrieving a queue. We are using a queue to hold the aquifer data we want to update in our system. You can learn more about the specifics by reading the comments in this module. Next, we finally come to the point that we are accessing one of our services we have written, the aquifer retrieval service. We will use two of its methods in short order to retrieve all of the aquifer names and then to retrieve the data for a specific aquifer. In the next video, we will look at processing the items in the queue with a queue worker. In the last video, we wrote a cron job that placed items in a queue. In this video, we are going to write our queue worker to process the items in the queue. We are going to look at the queue worker plugin type, the queue worker annotation, and using our Aquifer Manager service. We have previously worked with the block plugin type. Now we are going to look at the queue worker plugin type. It has a namespace distinct from the block plugin type. It uses the queue worker annotation instead of the block annotation. The block plugin annotation uses the ID, admin label, and category keys. The queue worker plugin uses the ID, title, and cron keys. Like the block plugin type, the ID represents the machine name of our queue worker. For the queue worker, this must match the name of the queue we created in our cron job. The title is for informational purposes and is the human readable name of the plugin. The cron key specifies how many seconds cron should allow.
Aqui, em vez de add translation, que é para chamar a função de tradução, podes meter só T, abrir aspas, abrir parênteses. Aqui, o add translation é para executar a função de tradução do Drupal, mas podes meter só T, abrir parênteses para fazer uma coisa. Tipo, não vais
Allow this process to run. We extend the queue worker base so that we've got access to the process item method. We implement the container factory plugin interface so that we can use dependency injection to inject our Aquifer Manager service. On account of the fact that we have created a service that provides a method to update aquifers, our logic for the process item method becomes trivial. We simply call the method. Can you see how nice it is to put all of our logic inside services? Well, it was a real breeze to write this plugin. In the next video, we will discuss the details of the first plugin you will write. Now that you've had a chance to see how easy it is to write plugins, you are going to have a chance to begin writing your first
Isto é basicamente aprender a fazer um plugin num minuto e 38 segundos.
plugin. Here, the requirements of the block, which of the methods you want to use, and you need to inject the entity type manager service into your block. Previously, we created a custom module to define a water eco action content type. It would be nice to show that information to visitors, wouldn't it? You are going to begin writing the block that displays the water eco action items. In order for our block to do anything, it needs to be able to pull data from the database. You must inject the entity type manager service into the block. Make sure to type hint with entity type manager interface, which resides in the Drupal core entity namespace. This block will ultimately be configurable, so you will need to use the following 3 public methods from block-base: default configuration, block form, and block submit. Naturally, we are going to want the block to actually display something, so we will also need to use the build method. The block-base class is located in the Drupal core block namespace. Do your best to get this block stubbed out on your own. In the next video, we will look at an example of another block that fills in the details for all of these things. In the last video, we looked over your assignment to create the stub of your first block plugin. In this video, we will look at another block plugin that fills in the remaining details you'll need to know in order to complete your block. We will look at completing the details in all the methods, defining cache metadata for the block, and defining our block schema. Let's walk through our Aquifer block class from the top to the bottom. It's placed in our module's source plugin block directory. Did you remember the correct namespace declaration? How well did you do with your use statements? And did you remember your annotation? Since we are writing a block, we need to extend the block base. Since we want to inject a service, we need to implement the container factory plugin interface. We'll store our node storage service in a protected property. Then we'll make sure we have that familiar pattern to take advantage of Symfony's service container dependency injection. You can read through the extensive notes at your leisure. For our Aquifer listing block, we will set the default number of aquifers to display to be 5. We need to instruct Drupal how to display the configuration of the block. We are going
Temos no box, temos RJ45.
Sim.
45 é o meu telefone, não é?
Isso é 11.
É 11? Ah, então a RJ45 é o que está ali na rede. Vocês estão a utilizar a net daí?
Sim.
Posso desligar a net
Da televisão? Sim, sim, sim.
Depois preciso de um cabo da HDMI.
da HDMI. Da HDMI também leva a mim.
Não esqueça.
Está tudo bem.
Ah, ok. Posso desligar um bocadinho?
Sim, sim.
Só para experimentar.
É só puxar a anel.
Sim. Não.
Se isto já estiver a funcionar, então não vou correr. Tem pilhas e tudo.
Fiquei um bocado a andar com este bloco configurável, não percebi o que é que ele quer fazer com isto. Está bem. Ok. Então vais definir uma interface que é para ir buscar, basicamente, define as funções. Aquele conteúdo.
Não sei se é daí, se é daqui. Vamos tentar fazer qualquer coisa.
Deixa eu ver se já me ok.
Não se parece muito nada.
Pois,
Viste aquela logo?
não deve ser muito famosa. Fazer uma nova pergunta.
Pode ser.
Nós já estamos a HDMI 3.
É algo que são mais importantes que outros. Menos problemas.
No serviço agora vai buscar aquilo que quer. Ok, no bloco deve ser para criar mesmo um bloco de raiz. Depois metê-lo lá. O bloco deve ser. Sim, exatamente. Para o gajo criar a classe que estende que estende o serviço, implementa o interface. Não é?
Talvez é a porta certa.
A porta aqui, HDMI, do router. Tem que ser uma determinada porta, é isso?
Não, tem que ser uma porta para a box
Sim.
e outra porta para distribuir a internet. Que é para estar a criar conflito.
Se uma router já é capaz de ter só ligado à porta do gabinete.
Tem 4 saídas.
Dizer-me 4 ou 0. Ok, mas se é isso, não é preciso de nenhuma configuração.
À partida, não.
Isto não tem. Eu já ia ver o e-mail, mas é tudo.
Estranho.
Mas dizer,
É só o tempo.
Mas eu vou dizer, antes de mexer, seja no que for, 16206. Tinha de acordo. Para ajudarem nas configurações. Mas para isso tem que ter acesso ao router.
Sim, ok.
Mas à partida é isso, tem que ser um cabo independente para a box e depois outra saída para distribuir a internet. Para criar conflito diretamente.
E precisamos de outra HDMI.
Vamos tentar iniciar a box novamente.
Não creio, seria muita coincidência. Mas também,
Duvido que depois
também não está aí ninguém que aceda aos servidores.
esta net é a nossa, certo?
Essa net é a vossa, certo? Essa net é a vossa. Mas isto já é a imagem da box, não é? Não é da
Certo.
televisão.
Não,
Então ela está a
não.
tentar configurar qualquer coisa. Ok. O que é que precisas?
No lugar que estava aí, João.
é o que nós temos aqui.
Se quiseres, podes levar, nós pusemos o.
Então vá, Roque, já levaram tudo, já levaram televisão, já levaram cabo HDMI.
Só falta portátil.
Ainda vai cá, que a música está a acertar a hora.
Não. Sim, vai. Não tem problema. Vou desligar.
Podes ligar. Deixa eu ligar.
Não deve haver problema, mas eu colo aqui na ligação de lado. Para ali fazer força. Não está aí. Agora é o HDMI 2. Não, o 2 diz cá qualquer coisa. ARC. HDMI 1, vê lá.
Ok. Obrigado.
Plugin. In this video, we will look at another block plugin that fills in the remaining details you'll need to know in order to complete your block. We will look at completing the details in all the methods, defining cache metadata for the block, and defining our block schema. Let's walk through our Aquifer block class from the top to the bottom. It's placed in our modules, source, plugin, block directory. Did you remember the correct namespace declaration? How well did you do with your use statements? And did you remember your annotation? Since we are writing a block, we need to extend the block base. Since we want to inject a service, we need to implement the container factory plugin interface. We'll store our node storage service in a protected property. Then we'll make sure we have that familiar pattern to take advantage of Symfony's service container and dependency injection. You can read through the extensive notes at your leisure. For our aquifer listing block, we will set the default number of aquifers to display to be 5. We need to instruct Drupal how to display the configuration for our block. We are going to present a select list that allows a choice of the numbers 2 through 20.
Okay.
Once the user clicks the Save button, we will want to save this block's configuration. We won't go over every line of our build method. You can look at the code on your own to learn about all the finer details. The method pulls all the aquifer pieces of content from the database. Then it prepares it to be displayed as an unordered list. The last thing it does is to ensure that the block cache will be invalidated every time there is a change to the pieces of the content on the site. There is one last piece that we want to do that would not be at all obvious to you. We want to define a schema for our block configuration. We'll need it later in the course when we get to testing. The easiest way to figure out how to create our schema is to copy existing schema. Fortunately, I've already got one defined inside our module's config schema directory. Note the pattern we followed to name the schema, including the fact that we used the ID we assigned our block with the annotation. The rest of the definition is pretty easy to interpret when we've got the information right in front of us. We are specifying our block settings and indicating that we've got a field called block count that is expected to be an integer. And now you've got almost all the information you need to be able to complete your block. In the next video, we'll fill in the specific details. In the last video, we looked at examples of what you need to know in order to complete your block. In this video, we will provide the unique details. We will look at what configuration options your block should provide, how your options are presented to the user, and what you are supposed to display in your block. As with our aquifer listing block, we want to be able to configure how many water eco action items will be displayed in the block. The default should be 5. We want the option to be displayed as a select list that allows from 2 through 20. The block will display the appropriate number of water eco action titles, and each will be linked to the full node view of that action item. You may build the URL from the entity.node.canonical route, remembering to pass it the node ID as an argument. Make sure you remember to set the cache tags and also to create your block schema. If you haven't already enabled your water eco action module, enable it now. If you have enabled it, you will need to navigate through Manage Extend to visit the module listing page, and then navigate through Manage Configuration, Performance, so that you can clear the caches. Visit Configuration cron and click Run cron to let our cron job populate aquifer pieces of content. Finish up by placing the aquifer listing block and the water eco action listing block, and experimenting with adding, updating, and removing water eco action pieces of content. You might even want to experiment with what happens if you don't specify the cache tags. Just remember that you'll once again need to clear the cache so that Drupal picks up the fact that you are no longer invalidating the cache for the block. In this section, we completed a lot of work to create a fully encapsulated solution for our aquifer data. We learned about making a truly useful service, writing a .module file that ran a cron job and placed items in a queue, creating a key worker to process a queue, and defining configurable blocks. In the next section, we will write another service that uses Symfony's request stack. In the last section, we did a lot of work with services and plugins. In this section, we will continue working with services. We will examine writing a service that utilizes Symfony's request stack and customizing content for visitors based on their IP address. In this video, we will look at the requirements for our service and accessing the request object from Symfony's request stack. Since we are writing a service, we will want to start out by writing our interface. Our service will need to be able to map a known IP address to a location using the latitude and longitude coordinate system and get the visitor's IP address. Let's see how we accomplish it. In order to determine a visitor's IP address, we will be using Symfony's request stack. Since we are dealing with a service, we will instruct Symfony to inject the request stack object, and from that object, we will retrieve the request object. Our method to map an IP address to a set of coordinates will first check whether it has received an IP address. If not, then it will use the method to retrieve the visitor's IP address. Then it calls our private method to convert the IP address to the set of coordinates. In our case, that method is just hard-coded to return the same set of coordinates every time. Our method to get the IP address is more interesting. It's surprisingly simple. Symfony's request object conveniently provides a method to get client's IP. Isn't that special? Thanks, Symfony. Let's get things packaged up now. We'll need to register our service with our IAI personalization services YAML file. Declare the service and remember to tell Symfony to inject its request stack service. Finally, create our IAI personalization info YAML file. This process should be getting to be almost second nature for you now. Enable the module so that it's ready for us to use. Why don't we move on to the next video and your next student exercise.
Bem, tenho deixado este student exercise só para ver os highlights do que é preciso
In
para
the
criar
last video, we created a new
uma coisa
service.
destes.
In this video, we are going to describe how you are supposed to put it to use. We are going to look at the additional block configuration you will add and how you will make use of our service. A visitor to our site wouldn't want to know about water eco action items all around the world. She would probably want to know about actions that are in close geographic proximity. Let's update our water eco action listing block to use our personalization service. Update the block so that it tells Symfony to inject our personalization IP service. Update the block configuration so that a block can specify a radius within which to search, defaulting the value to 10. The configuration will be presented as a select list that ranges from 1 through 20. You don't really need to update the query in the build function to limit the results to be within the desired radius. Instead, you will just add some text to the block that reads, eco actions within radius, kilometers of coordinates for the IP address, making sure to substitute the actual values for the placeholders inside of the curly braces. Finally, update the schema to include the information about the new block configuration option. Remember to clear the cache to get your changes to take effect. Then visit the block layout page and configure the water eco action block. We'll meet again in the next video for another student exercise.
Really?
In the last video, you updated a block to use a service we had written. In this video, we will lay out the work you will do to create your own service and to update a controller and a block to use that service. We will look at hints for how to write the service, what you should update in the controller, and what you should update in the block. When we were working with our product image gallery functionality, we noted that rather than hard coding field names inside of our controller and our block, it would be better if they used a service that took care of the necessary logic. Now it's time to write and use that service. We defined the interface in video 7.3, so we know what we are supposed to be creating in our service. We need a method to retrieve product images given a fully loaded product object. So how do we go about getting those images? Here's a hint. Take a look at how the product image gallery block gets them. Create the new service and register it with the IAI product services YAML file. remember that you'll want to visit the modules listing page and then clear cache. Once you've got the new service registered, update the controller so that it injects the product manager service. Change the logic that referred to the field product image field so that it now uses the retrieve product images method of the service. Update the block so that it injects the product manager service. Remove the private method and instead get the image data with the retrieve product images method. Once again, visit the modules listing page and clear cache. Then test that your changes worked. In this section, we have learned about Symfony's request stack service, and we've practiced our skills writing and using services. In the next section, we will start learning about a different type of service, Drupal's web services.
O gajo basicamente criou serviço que vai à procura daquele bloco que nós criámos nos vídeos, da galeria de imagens, e manda para lá o conteúdo que nós definimos aqui. O gajo disse ali.
Its web services. We will cover the core modules that makes REST services possible, the contributed module that is used to configure REST services, and consuming data from Drupal's REST services. In this video, we will look at the RESTful web services and serialization modules, the HAL module, and the HTTP basic authentication module. It is beyond the scope of this course to teach you what REST is. If you'd like to refer to documentation on Drupal's website, you may visit drupal.org docs 8 API RESTful Web Services API RESTful Web Services API Overview and drupal.org docs 8 Core Modules REST Overview. Here are the key points for you to know. Every REST resource must be located at a unique URI. A client interacts with the server, and the client uses HTTP verbs such as get, post, patch, and delete. In order to be able to do anything with REST in Drupal 8, we must enable the RESTful web services and serialization modules. The RESTful Web Services module is responsible for making it possible to expose resources through a RESTful Web API on our Drupal site. It's what allows Drupal to natively expose the content in the database and provide a way to update the content, as well as what allows us to write custom code to expose the contents of the database and provide a way to update the database. When delivering data from the database to clients, the data must be serialized in some fashion. The serialization module is what allows us to deliver the serialized data in an absolutely simple way. Additionally, the module takes care of deserializing data passed into the website through verbs such as post and patch. The serialization module is JSON and XML formats. The HAL module provides another serialization format. It stands for Hypertext Application Language, and it's designed to provide a way to define hypermedia. Drupal has implemented the HAL plus JSON version of the draft specification for HAL. The only reason that we care about using this module in this course is that when we want to use Drupal's native ability to accept post and patch requests, we must encode our data using the HAL plus JSON format. The easiest way to figure out how to do that is to first make a GET request that uses the HAL plus JSON format. If we don't enable the HTTP basic authentication module, then we don't have any way of determining what clients are allowed to interact with our REST services. Therefore, any client is able to do so. While we may not always have an issue with that when we are talking about a GET request, we will most certainly want to have some means of authorizing clients when we want to process post, patch, or delete requests. The HTTP basic authentication module provides us a means to interact with Drupal's roles and permissions structure. In the next video, we will look at a contributed module that makes it easier for us to configure our REST URIs. In the last video, we looked at the core modules we use for REST services. In this video, we are going to look at a contributed module. We are going to look at why do we need a module at all? Why is the module in the contrib space? And how do we use the module to define and configure REST URIs? When we enabled the 4 web services modules, we didn't see anything in the interface that we needed to or even could configure. Nothing seemed to change on the site either. The final piece we need to complete is to define and configure our REST URIs. We don't technically need a module to complete the definition and configuration. We could create the necessary YAML files by hand, but that approach is not exactly intuitive or convenient. It's much handier to be able to do things through the web interface. The REST UI module provides us with a means to use the web interface. The plan is that once it has had enough time to mature in the contrib space, it will be pulled into Drupal core. So let's install and enable the module and have a look at how it works. Use whatever means you prefer to download the module into the modules directory, and then
No core,
you can
yeah.
find the module at https://www.drupal.org/project/REST UI. Navigate through Manage Configuration REST. Enable the content resource. We are now viewing the configuration screen. There are checkboxes to indicate which verbs to support, request formats are available, and how clients will authenticate. We must select at least one verb, at least one request format, and at least one authentication method. The basic auth provider integrates with Drupal's roles and permissions. A client must have an account defined on the site in order to use this provider. The cookie provider allows any client to have access to a verb. When we save our changes, we will now have a URI available to use as a REST resource. We still need to specify certain things via Drupal's permissions, but we will look at that in other videos. In the next video, we will look at consuming data via Drupal's RESTful interface. In the last video, we looked at defining and configuring our REST resources with the contributing module. In this video, we will look at consuming the REST resource. We will look at how Drupal knows what to return at a URI, how clients interact with a RESTful web service, and how we have approached creating our sample clients for this course. When we configured the content resource in the previous video, we saw that the URI for that resource is node/node ID. You may be aware that this is the same as the URI as we use when we are viewing the full node on the site. So how does Drupal know when to display a normal page and when it should return some serialized data? The answer lies in the way groups are structured. We can see some of the specifics at drupal.org docs 8 API routing system structure of routing. The important pieces are the methods key and the requirements key along with the underscore format key. These keys allow Symfony to create distinct responses to requests from the same URI. In upcoming videos, we will get into more details on how clients interact with Drupal's RESTful web services. The important thing to recognize is that the point of having RESTful web services is to allow any type of client to access the service. It doesn't matter what programming language is being used, and it doesn't matter what types of device is being used. The only thing that matters is that the server receives an HTTP request that is formatted properly. The server then sends an HTTP response that is also formatted properly. The reason I am bringing up this point is to highlight the fact that it is not important how we create our clients for this course. We just need anything that can interact with our REST URIs. So let's finish up this video talking about how we will approach creating our clients. For the sake of simplicity of using our Git repository, we have placed all of our clients under the modules custom pseudo client directory. Within that directory, we have the delete, get, patch, and post subdirectories. I have written all the clients as simple PHP scripts using curl. If we were going to write clients within our Drupal application to access remote servers, we would likely use the Guzzle HTTP client that is packaged with Drupal. Each of the scripts is named in a self-documenting fashion. For example, inside the get subdirectory, we can see the get item from custom code PHP file. To enforce security, Drupal ships its htaccess files with some conditions and a rule that prevents us from running our PHP scripts from inside of the module's custom directory and its subdirectories. We can either add a condition that will allow us to do this, or we can simply copy our snippets into a different directory that we configure for our local environment. Rather than potentially sending a confusing message about the safety of modifying our htaccess file, I am going to copy the snippets into another directory that I will configure for my local environment to respond to the MD8D client's domain. In this section, we've taken a brief look at using Drupal 8's RESTful web services, defining and configuring REST resources, and consuming data from REST resources on a Drupal 8 site. In the next section, we will look at using the HTTP GET verb. In the last section, we learned how to get Drupal ready to act as a RESTful web service. In this section, we cover getting data from Drupal. We will explore getting data through views, getting data through Drupal core, and getting data through custom code. In this video, we are going to look at creating REST export displays, assigning meaningful labels. Navigate through Manage, Structure, Views, and click the Add View button. We can enter a short view name and a more helpful description. Choose to show content of the type Water Eco Action, sorted by newest first. Skip the page settings and block settings. Check the box to provide a REST export. The RESTful Web Services module is the module that is responsible for making this type of view display possible. Recall that we hadn't seen this option previously. Assign the path views/WEA. This corresponds to a REST URI. Click the entity link in the format section. We want views to display fields instead of the entire entity. Assign the alias WEA_title. Let's take a look at what Views has created for us by scrolling down to the preview at the bottom of the page. We are looking at JSON output, and there is something that is less than ideal. Everything is wrapped in an anchor tag. Click the content title link in the field section and uncheck link to the content. Since we are listing all of the Water Eco Action items, it will be helpful for people to choose a specific item to view its details. Click the Add button next to the Fields label. Search for ID and select the content ID. We don't need to display a prefix or suffix. If we look at the preview again, we see that the ID has been labeled NID, which is not intuitive to people who don't use Drupal. Scroll to the top of the page and click the settings link that appears next to the show label in the format section. Assign an alias of WEA_ID for the NID. If we wanted to restrict which serialization formats can be requested, we can click the settings link next to the format label in the format section. We aren't going to allow any of the formats, so we don't need to check any of the boxes. We aren't going to select any type of authentication. Change the pager by clicking the link for display a specified number of items and choose display all items. Leave offset set to 0. We are going to create another resource, so let's change the name of this resource. Click the display name link. change it to all WEA ref export. Click the drop-down next to the display name and select duplicate all WEA ref export. Select ref export. Change the display name for the duplicate to single WEA ref export.
Ok,
Click
vou
the
tirar a opção.
content ID link to make the change for this ref export override. Click the remove link. Click the add button next to the fields label. Select the coordinates and description fields and apply this display until you return to the administration screen. Click the settings link next to the show label in the format section. Assign an alias of WEA coordinates and WEA description to their respective fields. Click content authored on descending in the sort section. Change the drop-down to for this ref export override and click the remove link. Click the path link in the path settings section. Append a percent sign to the path. Click the advanced label to expand the field set and add a contextual filter. Select for this ref export override and search on ID. Select the content ID, click apply this display. Save our changes. Let's run our clients to see how things work. First, we will run the client that requests all of the water eco action items. Things look great. Now, let's run the client that requests a particular item. We have a winner. You may have a look over the clients on your own. In the next video, we will look at consuming REST resources from Drupal core.
Ok.
In the last video, we used views to provide a REST resource. In this video, we are going to use Drupal core. We are going to look at what Drupal core does not provide us, what permissions need to be set, and the limitations of Drupal's node resource. When we examined using the REST UI contributed module, we configured Drupal to make content available to us. Let's add a couple more serialization formats now. Drupal core does not give us a way to list multiple nodes. We aren't going to be able to do the analogous piece of listing all water eco action items.
Não pode escrever
We
no café.
are already encountering some limitations.
Isto está a matar. Mas já vai ser mais rápido. Mas já vai ser mais rápido. Sem uma nova season de Black Mirror. Não, isto é qualquer coisa, foi. Nunca tinha trabalhado, nem sabia o que era o REST, não, mas agora já acho o que é. Já vai ser uma API, né?
Sim.
Aquilo vou ver. Já é qualquer coisa.
Já vi algumas coisas, mas não.
Eu fazia isso manualmente. Também trabalho na história há pouco tempo, mas eu fazia isso manualmente. E usava o drupal, mas agora tudo dá code, punha, chegava alguma cena do tipo get, ele devolvia os dados no determinado momento.
Sim, sim. É uma coisa um bocado.
E às vezes para, porque eu isso.
Eu não gostei muito de fazer. Mas às vezes, mas ela demora um bocado.
Ela demora. Eu penso, ok. Isso, desliga.
Não liga.
Liga os três dias, pensar no carro. Não dá estrada. espera um bocado de novo. Às vezes carrega, desliga, depois espera um bocado e pronto. Acho.
Então não dá. Que?
Isto é uma lambaia.
Mas não.
Tipo, fazer.
Deixa eu ver esta carta do breve.
Eu acho que ela tem que
Eu acho que ela dá.
Achas? Acho que ela tem que estar parada.
Talvez não seja assim. Agora já. Mas ela não vai será que é isso?
Ela se calhar precisa de uma cápsula.
Pois. Calhar é
Ela se calhar vai funcionar de forma do outro lado.
só que esse quando já tem a cápsula é capaz. E depois já parar, fez assim.
Bem, o que este gajo fez? Só dá um segundo para trás. Ok.
And the limitations of Drupal's node resource. When we examined using the REST UI contributed module, we configured Drupal to make content available to us. Let's add a couple more serialization formats now. Drupal core does not give us a way to list multiple nodes. We aren't going to be able to do the analogous piece of listing all water eco action items. Thus, we are already encountering some limitations. The node permissions are already set to allow anonymous visitors to view published content. Since we don't have a REST resource that provides us with a list of node IDs, we will need to go to the content administration page to find one that is suitable. We will choose an item that is published and another item that is unpublished. Let's start out with the node that is unpublished, just to show that Drupal does respect the permissions we have set and will refuse to show us the information. Ignore the notices that appear on the page. I haven't bothered to do any type of error checking on the received response in the client. The only thing to pay attention to is that Drupal did not return the node object. Now let's have a look at the published node. Hooray! We've got the data we expected to see. Also, note the way the object we received is formatted. It's a typical Drupal nested structure, so it's not exactly intuitive to work with. This Drupal-y way of formatting an object is another limitation we encounter when we use Drupal core functionality. In the next video, we will look at how we can create our own custom get resources. In the last video, we commented on some of the limitations of using Drupal's core REST functionality. In this video, we are going to see how to write our own REST functionality for the get verb. We are going to look at writing our REST plugins, configuring our REST URIs, and assigning permissions for our REST URIs. We are going to end up writing 2 REST resource plugins. One will provide the listing of the water eco action items, and the other will provide the details for a particular water eco action. Let's start out by looking at our resource that lists all the water eco actions. We need to identify our plugin as a REST resource plugin type by using the @REST resource annotation. The ID needs to be unique. The canonical URI path lets Drupal know how clients will access our resource. The REST module provides us with our resource base. Even though we have not yet begun to explore multilingual functionality on our site, we still need to write our code so that it will work with a multilingual site. Therefore, we need to know the current language. We want the know restore service so that we can read the information from our water eco action items, and we can get it from the entity type manager service. The resource base class needs considerably more information for its constructor. So we've got to make sure that Symfony also injects the necessary information into our
Sim, onde é que ele vai buscar estes
We
fecheiros?
indicate that we will respond to the get verb for this
Sim, onde é que ele vai buscar estes
resource
fecheiros?
get
Bem.
method. Since we're going to list all of the water
Tu vês que isto é uma situação, não é?
we
Sobre
are
isto.
not expecting any
Ah, já quando vi
but
com
we're in the
Com o
database
Chrome.
to get all of our
Quer
water
dizer, deve
eco
copiá-los e meter aqui. Não é?
If we have any, then we are going to gather the information that will be used in the response object. Take note that we are making sure to pull the translated version of each item. We have specified the labels we return for each of the pieces of information. Notice how we choose labels that make sense, how we filter out all the other information about the entity we don't care about, and how we create our object in a simple, unnested fashion. Now let's look at our resource that displays an individual water eco action item. We make sure that our ID is distinct from the ID used for our other resource. We've specified a URI that is distinct as well, as we are expecting an ID to be passed to us. It is this difference in the canonical path that drives the need to have two separate resources. This time, our get method is expecting an argument, which is supposed to be the node ID. We use the node class to load our water eco action item data for the ID. The rest of the processing is similar to what we've done with our other resource. The next step is to configure our custom resources with the REST UI module. In order to get Drupal to detect our new code, we need to visit the extend page and then clear cache. The process to use the REST UI module to configure our REST resources is exactly the same as we followed to configure the content display with Drupal core. We will see our custom resources in the disabled section. We need to enable each one and then set the configuration. Since we must choose an authentication provider, we will select cookie for right now. Something new that we need to do is to explicitly grant permission for roles to access the get verb with our custom resources. Since we are not requiring clients to authenticate with our get verb, it is sufficient to grant the anonymous user access. We'll finish this video by taking a quick look at our handiwork. The water eco action item listing works beautifully. Notice that it is not displaying the unpublished water eco action item. Next, let's take a look at a couple of different items. First, we will check that an unpublished water eco action item produces an error. We will finish up by looking at a published water eco action item. Well, everything appears to be in good shape. You may feel free to experiment with Views, Drupal core, and our custom REST resources to explore the get functionality more. There is no official student exercise in this section. In this section, we learned about creating REST resources with Views, what Drupal core does and does not provide for its REST resources, and how to create a custom REST resource. In the next section, we will work with the HTTP post verb. In the last section, we looked at using the get verb. In this section, we will be using the post verb. We will cover posting data through Drupal core and posting data through a custom REST service. In this video, we will look at the HAL JSON format, how we need to format our post data, and the items Drupal creates. The content resource is already configured to allow the post verb. The format options specify how Drupal will serialize its response, not how we are allowed to format our post data. We had updated those in a previous video. The resource was also configured to use the HTTP basic authentication authorization provider. We had set the permissions to allow anonymous visitors to view published data, so the authentication method didn't really matter for the get verb. We will be using the basic authentication authorization now that we are going to be posting data. As an additional security measure, we are going to create a role of privileged REST user so that we can grant permissions to it instead of having to grant permissions to one of the other authenticated user roles. Now let's assign the necessary permissions. A post operation is intended to create a piece of content. Having access to the post verb does not grant access to actually create a piece of content. We will grant the permission to create new water eco action pieces of content. Finally, we need to create a user that has the role. For the sake of simplicity, we are going to create a username rest_user and assign the password rest_user. Please do not do this on a live site. In order to post data via Drupal core, there is a particular bit of information we need to know. We will figure out this information by issuing a GET request on a water eco action item piece of content using the HAL-JSON response format. Drupal core requires the _links key and the type nested key. It also wants our data to be formatted a particular way. For example, look at the title data. Look at the sample client code for more information. Let's see what water eco action items we have on our site right now. Now let's run our client and see what happens. It displays the information we sent, and you can see how the data has been formatted. It also displays the data we received from Drupal's response. Everything looks good from the client side of things. Let's see how it looks in our administrative area. Indeed, Drupal has created a water eco action piece of content. Take note that it is assigned to the rest_user account and that it is published. We could have passed other data to let Drupal know which account to assign and whether it has created a water to see how the data has been formatted. Let's run our client and see what happens. It displays the information we send, and you can see how the data has been formatted.
Eu não percebi como é que vais fazer isto. Eu só tenho um endereço.
Não, tem que ser alguma coisa.
Tem qualquer coisa ali em qualquer sítio, não é tipo de módulo.
It also displays the data we received from Drupal's response. Everything looks good from the client side of things. Let's see how it looks in our administrative backend. Indeed, Drupal has created a water eco action piece of content. Take note that it is assigned to the rest_user account and that it is published. We could have passed other data to let Drupal know which account to assign and whether to set the piece of content to be published. However, maybe we don't want clients to be able to specify that or other information. We may want to maintain control over that ourselves. In the next video, we will look at creating a custom REST resource. In the last video, we posted data to our site through Drupal core. In this video, we will use a custom URI. We will look at the simplified post data format and the item we have created. We've already got a start on our REST resource. We'll need to update the WEA resource class. There are a number of additional use statements that we needed. We won't look at them specifically. You can look at the commit to see what we added. One key point we will highlight is the link relations map ID and the URI paths key. That map ID is something that Drupal has defined and knows to look for. Full disclosure, we didn't need that value in the previous video when we wrote the get method. I had lumped it in accidentally. In fact, you may have noticed that when we configured our resource, the summary showed the post method struck through. That should have been a clue to me. If you noticed the issue and figured out what needed to be done to correct it, kudos to you. You were paying more attention than I was. Now that we are actually writing the post method, we do need to specify the link relations information. We've injected a new service so that we can access the current user because we need to check whether the user has permission to create a water eco action item piece of content. Not surprisingly, all of our work has been added to the post method. Our method expects an array of data. Drupal will simply pass in whatever post data it received. The logic in our method is well documented and fairly self-evident. Let's just highlight one section. We are using the title and description that was posted, and we expect it to be a simple array with the keys title and description. We are setting the type, published status, and water eco action item status on our own. Now that we have looked at how we coded our post verb, let's test the functionality. Look at the data we've sent. We don't need to use the JSON format, and we don't need to use complicated nested arrays. We can still choose to receive a response serialized in whatever format we desire. Let's look at how our piece of content was created. We still set the author to rest_user. However, we have set the piece of content to unpublished. Additionally, we set the status to pending. It really wasn't all that hard to write our own REST service, and we achieved a number of advantages for our clients and ourselves in the process. In the next video, we will go over your student assignment for this section. In the last video, we looked at using our custom REST service to post data. You may have noticed that we didn't cover the configuration though. In this video, we are going to discuss your next student exercise. You will need to configure our REST resource and set the necessary permissions. Keep in mind that you will need to visit the module listing page and clear cache to pick up our latest code changes. One hint, we must choose the basic authentication authorization provider and no longer need the cookie authentication. Experiment with our client that posts using Drupal core. See about modifying to create data in the other fields in the water eco action item content type. Experiment with our client that posts using our custom REST service. Again, see about modifying it to create data in the other fields in the water eco action content type. The expectation is that you will find things are considerably easier using our custom REST service. In this section, we learned about what the JSON format looks like and how we can format post data to use it, using basic authentication to ensure that Drupal enforces permissions for creating pieces of content, and the advantages of writing our own REST service to allow posting data. In the next section, we will look at updating data with the patch verb.
Fiquei bocado agora com a cena do post, não sei como é que é muito tempo lá abaixo. Então se aquela função de REST já tem lá aquilo pré-definido, né?
In the last section,
chegar àquele caminho.
content on our site with a post request. In this
Sim.
section,
Yeah.
we will update content with a patch request. We will cover using Drupal core REST services
Yeah.
and updating our
Para se estar com a informação.
In this video, we'll use Drupal core. We will look at configuring the content resource and how a patch differs from a post. Okay, I admit it, I just lied to you. We aren't really going to look at configuring a content resource. When we enable the REST UI module, it shows some sensible configuration options for us. However, there is one bit of configuration we still need to complete. Do you know what it is? If not, you'll have to wait for the hint in your student exercise. Let's compare our post and patch clients. We see that the differences between a patch and a post are we must use the URI that includes the node ID, and we specify only the fields we wish to update. First, let's test out what happens when we try to patch a water eco action item that was not created by the REST user. We'll take note of this node ID and pass that in as the item to our client. When we run our client, we see that we receive an empty response. Let's check things out in the administrative interface. It looks like our content has remained unchanged. Now let's test patching a piece of content that we did create with our REST user. After we run our clients, we are expecting that this node will appear at the top of the content listing when we refresh the page. When we run the client, we do receive a response with that node. After refreshing our page, the node does appear at the top. We did it. In the next video,
A ficha desse ninguém. Vocês estão a precisar de os cabos por aqui.
Isso aqui lá embaixo.
Vocês não se importam de levar para os puxar aqui toda a minha costa? Mas isto é bué curto. Isto não queima?
Não, isto é
Já vem, mas o xixi.
Ficou gravado.
the last video, we patched content on the site at Drupal core In this video, we will use our custom REST resource. We will look at the additions to our custom resource and updating a piece of content. It's time to head back to our resource. Can you guess what we are going to do? Of course, we are going to add the patch method. We won't need any other
Of course.
because we added it when we wrote the post method. Our patch method expects the ID of our piece of content in addition to the data to update it. Well, we've seen how we wrote our patch method. Once again, we are going to leave configuring the URI and setting permissions to your student exercise. We will run only one test with our client to update a piece of content we have created with the REST user. You will test against a piece of content created by another user in your student exercise. Take note of the node ID of an appropriate water eco action piece of content. It doesn't matter if it was created via Drupal core or via our custom REST URI. Let's run our client that runs against our custom REST URI with that item. Well, it looks like we've succeeded from the client side of things. Let's see how it went on the server side. Ta-da! Success is a wonderful thing. In the next video, we will discuss your student exercise.
Não sei se isso Pedro Messi, uma das partes em que ele explica, mas já sabes o resultado final.
In the previous two videos, we left
Mas agora
out
que a gente tem que explorar isto.
In this video, we will lay out your student exercise, which involves completing those steps. You will need to configure the water eco action resource and set permissions.
Eu acho que falta ali algumas explicações intermédias.
Finally, you will test our two patch clients. The process of configuring our resources should be straightforward. Just make sure you are using HTTP basic authentication. When setting permissions, test various scenarios. See what happens if you don't grant any access to update pieces of content. Then see how things work when you grant permission to update the user's own pieces of content. And finally, see how things work when you grant permission to update any user pieces of content. There really shouldn't be any surprises about what happens. Another bit of configuration with which you might wish to experiment is the setting
Eu já pus a tua hora.
resources. Currently,
Não foi. Não, vocês vão parar aqui. Não é coisa. Eu estava a ver o que
Também está quente por nós.
não está a parar.
Está frio.
Estava a ver agora o estava sem fome.
Pá, só sei que ela não ligada há 300 séculos. Era melhor desligar, não?
Não, acho que não tens. Não estou.
Termostat.
Tá.
Ninguém quer, né?
Não,
Não,
obrigado.
configuration with which you might wish to experiment is the setting for our REST resources. Currently, we have the regularity REST resource. Now you switch it to method and see different things you can test. To make things even more interesting, you should also experiment with changing things in our clients. See if you can update some other fields by authenticating as different users. Maybe even users that are granted different roles and permissions. Make sure to get the hang of things now, because the next section is all about you and your student exercise. We've now wrapped up this section. We learned about using the patch verb to update these. In the last few sections, we looked at the get, post, and patch verbs. In this section, we are going to look at the delete verb. Actually, we're going to give you your assignment to set up the delete verb. The content resource should already be set up. All you need to do is set the necessary permissions. Then see if you can write a client to perform a delete operation. Next, you should add the delete method to our WEA resource class. Make sure that the client is attempting to delete an existing water eco action item, and that the client has permission to delete that particular item. If you successfully delete the item, you may return a resource and then set the necessary permissions.
Should I do my
I'm
part?
writing a command to perform a delete operation with our custom REST URI. Make sure you test the following scenarios. Attempt to delete a node that doesn't actually exist. Attempt to delete a node for which the client does not have permission. Delete a node for which the client does have permission.
So this is your
Attempt
question.
to delete something other than a large section. This section was short and sweet. Its main focus was to give you an opportunity to Don't worry though, there is still more opportunity to write custom code in upcoming sections. In the next section, we will learn about using Drupal 8's great multilingual capabilities.
Sim, mas isto não está mal todo. Pelo menos eu já vejo como é que é a estrutura, para pedir um get ou fazer um post. Isto é nós a fazer.
We have
Especificar.
done a lot of work to create content on our site and write custom modules to enhance the site functionality. Now it's time to learn how we can enhance the great foundation we already have by making our site fully multilingual. One important note, regardless of whether one chooses to enable any of the multilingual modules, Drupal still keeps track of the language code throughout the database. It has to, just to be prepared for a point in time when multilingual is enabled. And aside from that, Drupal no longer assumes that English is the default language of a site. When you install Drupal, you have the option to install it in whatever language you prefer. Another important note, multilingual is a complex topic, and we won't be exploring every possible detail. Instead, we will focus on the key pieces that we are leveraging to add the desired functionality to our site. In this section, we will look at the language module, the content translation module, the interface translation module, and the configuration translation module. In this video, we will focus on the language module. We will look at languages configuration and content language configuration. When we looked at the tour module in a previous section, we enabled the language module so that we could look at its tours. The language module is the base module that is required by the other translation modules. It doesn't do much on its own, though. We will look briefly at what enabling the language module adds to the interface. For simplicity's sake, we are building our site. So we will look briefly at what enabling the language module adds.
Yeah.
For simplicity's sake, we are building our site signed in as user one, which gives us permission to do everything. It is worthwhile noting that the language module does define a permission that determines which roles are allowed to administer languages. Enabling language adds two new configuration options, languages and content language. Language gives us the ability to add another language to our site. We can't begin to use multilingual until we have at least two languages. As this ability is one of the main functions of the language module, let's add another language now. The process is quite simple. It's only that we click the Add Language button and select a language. Not much happens at the moment though. We'll also need to enable at least one of the other three modules in order for this new language to be used or seen anywhere. In fact, enabling another language before we have enabled the interface translation module introduces a known bug. We will work more with this language and the known bug when we look at the other multilingual modules. Let's move on to look at the detection and selection tab. Interface language detection allows us to configure how Drupal will determine what language to display in the interface. There are many different options for detecting the language. For this course, we are going to use URL language detection based on a path prefix. The default configuration is fine for our purposes. However, if we don't enable interface translation, this won't have any effect. We will look more at what elements are considered part of the interface when we look at interface translation. Content language allows us to select which content types are translatable and what parts of each type are translatable. We will look at this more when we look at content translation, since we are extremely limited in what we can configure prior to enabling the content translation module. So why don't we head into the next video, in which we will look at the content translation module.
Será que não filme aqui?
In the last video,
Nunca fui aqui na
the
tradução.
language module doesn't do much
Como é que ele vai buscar? É tipo um utilizador que escreve? Utilizador, o administrador de conteúdos.
By looking at the configuration for content
Não percebi bem.
language and mentioned that it ties
Será que a
into
tradução
the
é tipo Google Translate?
In this video, we will enable the content translation module and explore the functionality that it provides. We will look at determining what can be translated in content, customizing content language detection, and translating content. Content translation is probably the most intuitive type of translation to understand. We have pieces of content that we want to be able to display in different languages. But what constitutes content? Since I already know the answer to this question, I will walk you through an exploration of what translatable content looks like before we turn on the content translation module. The most obvious type of content is nodes. If we explore the operations available on the content administration page, we see that we can edit and delete pieces of content. You might think that vocabularies are content. They are actually configuration. They are not translatable now, nor will they be after we enable content translation. Taxonomy terms are considered content, and it will become possible to translate them once we have enabled the content translation module. As with vocabularies, menus are considered configuration, and menu items are considered content.
Okay.
So let's enable the content translation module and take another look at things. Take note of the message about enabling translation. Clicking this link will take us back to the content translation page we saw in the previous video. Before we click it though, let's just acknowledge that there are permissions for the content translation module. In order to get access to translating content and elements within the content, we are going to select the checkboxes for content, custom menu link, and taxonomy terms. As we check these boxes, other options will appear on the page. We will accept the default selections for most of these. However, we also want to indicate that the file is translatable on the product content type. We will return shortly to complete some of the translation. First, we will return to the language detection configuration. There is a new option that allows us to customize the content language detection. This can come in handy when you wish to have a separate detection for the interface language detection. We will look at this more when we examine the interface translation. Now, it's time to actually translate some things. Looking at the product's content type, we see that we can add a Spanish translation and translate all the fields, including things like the image associated with the product, as well as the alias, authoring information, and promotion options. We can translate similar things for the book content type. The taxonomy terms still appear in English. Fortunately, we can translate those as well through a similar process of selecting the translate option and then adding a translation for the desired language. Since we didn't look specifically at the book content type, we didn't see the option for translating the menu entries. Let's look directly at the menu itself now. While we noticed that it was possible to translate the URL alias, we have chosen to use the automatically generated alias. Translating the pattern requires us to turn on configuration translation. So right now, the pattern is not quite right for our translated pieces of content. We will address that in an upcoming video in this section. The last thing we will do in this video is to place the language switcher block to make it easier for us to examine how our translations are working. Now that we've got the language switcher block in place, we can easily switch between our translations and it becomes more apparent that there are some things that are not quite right. We will look at those in the next video when we complete some initial configuration of views to handle multilingual. We finished up the last video by placing the language switcher block and noticing that some things didn't look right now that we have some translations in place. In this video, we will do some initial configuration of views to clean things up. We will look at filtering the result of views to show the correct language and working around a bug in views. When we look at the product listing, we see that it is showing both the English and the Spanish version of the Drupal product, regardless of which language we have selected to view. We can correct this problem by updating the view to use a filter to show results based on the translation language selected for the content. Now when we switch between languages, we see that only the appropriate language results show. Since we have not yet created a translation for the Drupal, it does not appear when we select the Spanish version of the product listing. Now let's take a look at the Drupal user guide. We see both the English and the Spanish version of the video in the related videos block. We will correct this error by adding a filter for the translation language. We will finish by looking at the Drupal product page. There are two errors here. One of them will be fixed by adding the filter as we have already done. We will leave that for your student exercise. The other problem is actually a bug with the way Views handles multilingual. You may reference the issue file on drupal.org at node 2737619. We will fix this bug by enabling aggregation on the view. By choosing to aggregate our title field by the entity ID, we will eliminate the duplication of the title for each translation that has been created. In our case, each result was showing 2 times because we have 2 translations defined. With this aggregation in place, we are now back to the state that we need to filter for the translation language. In the next video, we will go over your student's exercise. In the last 2 videos, we looked at translating content and configuring views for multilingual. Now it's your turn to do some translation and configuration. Before you add any translations, add the translation language filter for the user guide pages referencing a product. You may group the results together. Make sure to choose the relationship we have defined. Next, visit the content, language, and translation configuration and enable translation for basic page. Finish up your exercise by translating book pages, products, and basic pages. Translate the terms in each vocabulary, and remember to also publish the English translation and set the author to user 1. Finish up by translating the menu items. You may do this either while translating the pieces of content or directly through the menu items themselves. You still won't be able to translate the menu item for the product listing view though. Finally, it's not important that you do a proper translation. If you choose not to, you can make it simple by adding something like en español to the different pieces of content. When you are finished, I'll see you in the next video in which we explore the interface translation module. While we were translating content in previous videos, we noted that some of the things we wanted to translate were actually part of the configuration. Since configuration translation requires interface translation to be enabled, we will now look at interface translation. We will look at a known bug within interface translation and language detection. Start out by enabling the interface translation module, and then wait for it to finish the process of updating the configuration. At this point, you would expect that since we have specified Spanish as one of our site languages, we should be able to see the interface translated into Spanish. Let's switch our interface to use Spanish by adding the ES prefix in the path. Unfortunately, we don't get the expected result. There is a known bug with this issue. You may view it on drupal.org at node 2609256. Fortunately, there's a fairly simple workaround. We can navigate to localize.drupal.org/download and scroll down to the Spanish translation file. Once we have saved it to our computer, we navigate through Config, User Interface Translation, and click the Import tab. We choose our configuration file and set the checkboxes as we desire. Then we click the Import button and wait for the process to finish. Did you notice that we still have the ES prefix in the path name? Once that happens, as the process nears its end, we are starting to see some of the text in Spanish. After the process completes, we now see our entire interface in Spanish. Now that both the interface and the content are being translated, it makes more sense to consider the language detection settings for each one. Recall that we navigate through Config Languages, and then we click the Detection and Selection tab. If we click the checkbox to customize content language detection, we will see the options we have there. Feel free to experiment with this on your own. We aren't going to change any of the default settings in this course. Let's return to the site and have a look at a few things when we select the Spanish language. We see that we've got more that needs to be translated, and we'll explore translating that in our next video when we enable the configuration translation module. In the last video, we enabled the interface translation module. We are ready to finish our exploration of multilingual by enabling the configuration translation module. In this video, we will look at path alias patterns, site configuration, blocks, content types, and views. Enable the configuration translation module and wait for the process to finish. Then return to viewing one of our products on the site and use the language switcher block to select the Spanish language. There are a lot of things that we'd like to see translated. Let's look from the top of the page down. There's the path alias, the site name and site slogan, block titles, field labels, and field suffixes. Let's look at our product listing view. There are a number of things we want to translate here as well. The path alias, the menu item, the page title, filter labels, and the button label. There are other things that aren't immediately obvious that we'd like to translate as well. However, there are some known bugs with processing the translations of these things. You may look on drupal.org at node 2845437 for more details. The net outcome for this course is that we can't fully explore translating our tour and the configuration for our custom modules. Why don't we start taking off items on our to-do list now? To make things easier, let's switch back to English first. Navigate through Configuration, URL Aliases, and click the Patterns tab. We have 3 patterns set up for English. Now we're going to create the patterns for Spanish. The basic page pattern isn't any different because we are simply displaying the node title. Since we have translated the title of our basic pages, the pattern will pick up that new title when the alias is generated. The book page and product content type patterns have something more interesting to do. In addition to the fact that there is a literal string in the pattern that we will translate, the book page also references a product with an entity reference field. As mentioned, we are responsible for translating the literal string that is a part of the pattern. However, as with the basic page, we don't have a special way to select our tokens. We saw that the node title is translated properly. The desired outcome for our product reference is that the node title should reflect the value of the translated node title. Let's bulk generate the aliases for all of the pieces of content on our site, and then have a look at what the paths are. Since we didn't actually translate the title of our products, it's hard to tell whether the alias for the book pages is working as desired. So let's temporarily translate one of our products and regenerate the alias for the book page to see what happens. After we update the node title of our product, we see that it has picked up its new alias. Now let's update the alias for one of the book pages that references that product. First, let's look at that book page in English. The product title reflects the English version of the product. Then we will use the language switcher to view the page in Spanish. We see that the product title now reflects our translated product title. In fact, there is a bug that requires a workaround for this to happen. This is looking in our environment because we have, and we will do that for this. Let's move on to looking at our blocks. When we look at our book page and we switch from English to Spanish, we see that the contents of the blocks change, but not all of the titles of the blocks change. Similarly, when we look at the blocks displayed, when we look at a product, we see that the contents of the blocks change to reflect the Spanish version, but the labels don't change. We've got different types of blocks that we are viewing. Some of them are created by the system. Those blocks' titles change. Some of the blocks are created by our custom modules, and some of the blocks are created by views. The titles of those blocks don't change. Let's take care of the titles of the blocks our custom modules created. We can go into the block configuration for each of the blocks, and then click the tab to translate the block. When we click the Add button for the Spanish translation, we see that the only thing we have access to is the title. We'll change a few more titles right now, and leave one for you to change later. After we've updated the titles, we will toggle back to the Spanish version of the site and verify that our translated titles display for the blocks. Before we move on to the blocks provided by views, we are going to look at translating elements within the content types themselves. If we look at one of our products and switch to viewing the site in Spanish, we see that the labels and suffix are still in English. Navigate through structure, content types, and click on the Manage Fields option for the product content type. We will scroll down to product throughput and select the translate option from the operations. When we click the add button, we get access to the label, help text, and the prefix and suffix values for this field. Enter our translations and click the save translation button. Now, when we return to viewing this product and we switch from the English version of the site to the Spanish version of the site, we see the translated text for the product throughput field. Let's finish things up in this video by looking at translating our views. Navigate through structure, views, and then select the translate operation for our product listing view. Click the add button for the Spanish translation. In order to get at all the pieces we need to translate, we will need to expand the master display settings field set and the product listing default display options field set within that. We will also need to expand the page display settings field set, the page display options field set, and the product menu field set. When we return to the site and view the product listing page in Spanish, we see that we have gotten close. However, there are still some things we have forgotten to translate. We were already in the right area and just needed to dig a little deeper. Guess when the digging is going to happen? Yes, you guessed it right. You will complete the rest of the views translation in your student exercise. So let's move on to
Posso avançar? Pois.
Last
O que é que gajo vai dizer aqui para andarmos para a frente? Está a ser uma seca esta tradução.
In this video, we will lay out your
Só isto.
exercise to complete the translation process. And by the way, I have already included the translation of our tour. You may look in the branch of the repository that corresponds to this lesson if you wish to see it. Let's look at the remaining configuration pieces you need to translate. Translate the site name and slogan. Translate the blog title for the aquifer listing.
É uma coisa, ir aos sítios onde eles são definidos,
You might
fazer traduzir e dar o nome. É porque isto, pelos vistos, o tradutor só vai ao conteúdo e não vai aos podemos saber isso, a estrutura.
This makes sense when you think about the fact that the language in Drupal considers configuration, but then look at that section, we will learn how to write tests using PHP unit. we have written a lot.
Deixa eu ver aqui um overview. Não vimos o model API.
O quê?
Vimos.
Vimos, é para
Ah, ok.
baixo. Está para baixo.
Pois. Este foi o mínimo.
Faltam 9 mais 5, mas
Yeah.
Of custom code in this course. At this point, whatever
Yeah.
testing you get done.
Okay.
If we really want to ensure the initial and ongoing quality of our code, we will want to write tests that can be run via an automated process. In this section of the course, we are going to examine using PHP unit to test our code. We will discuss running tests with PHP unit, writing unit tests, writing kernel tests, writing functional tests, and writing functional JavaScript tests. In this video, we will talk about running tests with PHP unit and why we write different types of tests. Drupal 8 adopted PHP unit as its testing framework to replace the previous framework, which was simple test. You can read more about PHP unit on drupal.org at docs/PHP unit. In order to run PHP unit from the command line, and because of the way we have installed Drupal, we need to make sure to install certain dependencies. In order to install those dependencies, we must first ensure we have installed Composer. When we look inside of our vendor directory, prior to running Composer, we see that there is no PHP unit directory. Depending on which version of Composer you install on your system, you will either need to run Composer install or Composer install --dev. If you are unsure, you may feel free to run Composer install --dev. After running Composer install,
Mas
there are
eu daqui
many directories.
faz um plano. Eu quero instalar aqui isto, né? Só que a coisa não está na parte.
Now that PHP unit is installed, we can run our first tests. We will start off by running a single unit test from the band module that comes with Drupal core. This test runs fine as we have entered the command. However, if we try to run functional tests in this same way, we see that we encounter an error. If we look at the php.xml.dist file, we find out that we are supposed to run functional tests with a privileged user. We also need to set certain environment variables. You can read more about this in either the README file located in the core tests directory or in the documentation on drupal.org at docs/p/phpunit/running-phpunit-tests. In this course, we will take the approach of using sudo to run the test as the www-data user. To set up the environment variables, we need to copy the phpunit.xml.dist file into phpunit.xml and make a few modifications. We need to set up our base URL, database parameters, and an output directory. Pay attention that we need to create the simple test directory inside of our sites directory. Now let's try running functional tests again with this method, and we will see that all of the tests pass. We have just seen a couple of examples of running specific tests. We can run all of the tests that the band module has written by using the --root option. In addition to running the unit and functional tests that we have already seen, PHP unit will also run kernel tests. The skip tests have to do with migrations. If you want to see a completely successful set of core tests, use --root tour. Let's finish this video by talking about the different types of tests we can run and why we would run each of them. The most basic test is a unit test. A unit test is intended to test the smallest possible bit of functionality. Each unit test will generally be written for a specific method of a single class. Unit tests are the fastest running tests. Many times, we may find it challenging to do all the necessary mocking of objects to write certain unit tests. In these situations, we may be able to write kernel tests. Kernel tests are intermediate tests between unit tests and functional tests. Kernel tests load minimal parts of the database and allow us to test some functionality against some actual objects and data. Kernel tests still run reasonably quickly. While it's extremely important to have a good test suite of unit and kernel tests, it's still important to do some type of integration testing. Without integration testing, it's possible that we will have parts of our code that work perfectly fine in isolation, but that there is something that goes wrong once we expect them to work with the rest of our code. Functional tests provide us with a way to do this integration testing. These tests do a full bootstrap of Drupal for each text, and as a result, take much longer to run. The last type of test we may need to write is a functional JavaScript test. This test is an extension of a functional test. We use it when we need to test some type of user interaction on our site. Place your PHP unit tests inside of a folder located inside your module root directory under test/src. The folder should be named functional JavaScript, kernel, or unit as appropriate. We will look at examples of all 4 types of tests in upcoming videos. As a matter of fact, in the next video, we will get to learn more about unit tests. In the last video, we discussed the different types of tests we write. In this video, we will learn about writing unit tests. We will look at mocking objects, data providers, and testing both good and bad data. Before we get into any of the details of writing our unit test, let's lay out what we want to test. The Aquifer Manager service has only 2 public methods, read aquifer and update aquifer. We will test the update aquifer method. In order to fully test it, we need to check the following situations. We are updating an aquifer that doesn't exist, and we are updating an aquifer that does exist. Additionally, we want to make sure that we test with both good and bad data. We shouldn't assume that the data coming into our service will always be valid. Instead, we should ensure that when invalid data is passed, that the service handles it without producing a fatal error. Invalid data can occur if we are missing required information, as well as if we provide information that is not of the correct type. Knowing the above information, we will see that we need to create 5 tests. Creating an aquifer with good data. Creating an aquifer passing a data that is missing required information. Creating an aquifer passing a data that has information that is not the right type. Updating an aquifer with good data. And updating an aquifer with data that has information that is not the right type. There is no test for updating an aquifer with missing data, since we are not required to update any of the fields. And if we pass an aquifer name that does not exist, we would then try to create it. Since we've got to test a variety of data, let's look at creating data providers. A data provider is a method that returns an array of data. PHP unit iterates through that array, calling the method that uses that data provider. The method that uses this data provider is expecting a single argument to be passed in. The argument is supposed to be an array of values. We connect our method being tested to the data provider with the app data provider annotation. Looking at our test create good aquifer method, we see that we do a good amount of mocking of objects. Rather than getting lost in too much detail in this video, we will highlight a few key pieces. You may find more of an explanation in the comments in the tests. Let's jump to the end of the method to see why we have a need to mock objects. We want to test the update aquifer method of the Aquifer Manager service. So we will need to create the service. If we look at the constructor for the service, we see that it expects an entity manager interface to be passed in. Therefore, we need to mock an entity manager. Everything else cascades from that need. The entity manager needs certain objects, which in turn need other objects. We've got to mock all of those objects. We've chosen to mock all of our objects within the test methods themselves because the tests needed some slight variations on what the objects were supposed to do. If all of the tests needed the exact same objects, we could have mocked them in the setup method and stored them in protected properties of our test class. Now let's run our tests and see if our code is working as it should. The tests took about 17 seconds to run, and everything passed. You may be curious what it would look like to mock your objects in the setup method of your test class. And that's a good thing, because you get to explore this for yourself in the next video when we lay out your student exercise. Take your time learning from this unit test and get yourself ready to write your own. In the last video, we looked at the unit test we wrote for the Aquifer Manager service. In this video, we will lay out your student exercise to write a unit test for the personalization IP service. You will want to test the get IP address and map IP address methods of the service. There is no need for a data provider to test the get IP address method. However, you will need to create an object for the service. As mentioned at the end of the previous video, you are going to get a chance to use the setup method to create objects that will be used in your test methods. And this is where you will create the personalization IP service. Look at the constructor of the personalization IP service, and you will see it expects a request stack object. While we previously used the getMockBuilder method to mock objects, you will be able to use the getMock method to mock an instance of Symfony component HTTP Foundation request stack. The method you will expect is getCurrentRequest, and you will return a request. Therefore, you will need to create a request object as well. Look at Symfony component HTTP Foundation request and see if you can figure out how to create the request. Once you have created the request, you will want to set the remote address by using the following line of code. Request server set remote address 127.0.0.1. You now have the outline of what you should place in the setup method. It will define two protected properties for your class, request stack and personalization IP service. Write the method to test the get IP address method of the service. The only thing the test method requires is a simple assertion to check that the get IP address method returns 127.0.0.1. Before writing the method to test the map IP address method of the service, write the data provider. The data provider should return an array with 2 elements. Each element is an array with 2 elements. The map result and the IP address. In other words, the test method expects 2 arguments and should run 2 tests. Write a test to see what happens when no IP address is passed, and one more to see what happens when an IP address that is different from what we specified in the mock request object is passed. Your method to test the map IP address should have an assertion that checks that the map IP address method returns the expected mapped result. If this is your first time writing tests, you will probably find this exercise somewhat challenging. Don't be discouraged, and just do your best to figure it out on your own, using the information provided in this assignment and looking at the code for the other unit tests. Rest assured that the answer will be in the repository for the branch in the next video, in which we will look at writing kernel tests.
That's right? Okay.
In the last 2 videos, we looked at unit tests. When we looked at our test for the Aquifer Manager service, we saw that we had to do a lot of mocking of objects. Sometimes we want to be able to work with some actual objects while still being able to avoid a full bootstrap of Drupal. In this video, we will learn about kernel tests. We will look at the difference between a kernel test and a unit test and what advantages kernel tests provide compared to unit tests. Let's examine a kernel test for the Aquifer Manager service. For our kernel test, we are going to extend the entity kernel test base instead of kernel test base. This test base provides a bit of necessary additional functionality that we'd like to make use of. Feel free to spend some time comparing how the entity kernel test base extends the kernel test base. You may find the entity kernel test base under core tests, Drupal, kernel tests, core, entity. The first difference we will notice when writing a kernel test is that we specify which modules we want to install. It's important to understand that installing these modules in this fashion is not exactly the same as when they are installed for a functional test. This becomes clearer when we look at our setup method. Even though we have specified that we wanted the node and aquifer modules installed, we need to make use of the install config method to pull in the rest of the data we need in order to write our kernel test. The next thing we do in our setup method is to create a node. Notice that we don't store it in a protected property, nor do we mock any objects as we did with our unit test. With our kernel test, we are going to have access to the database as well as other services. We don't mock objects and manually instantiate our Aquifer Manager service either. We retrieve it from the service container. We didn't test the read Aquifer method in our unit test. We are going to test it with our kernel test because now the database service will be able to find the node that we created in our setup method. Look at how simple the test read Aquifer method is. We are able to test out retrieving the node we created in the setup method. If we had tried to do this with a unit test, it would have been a pointless exercise because we would have ended up mocking everything, including what the read Aquifer method of the Aquifer Manager service returned. You may look through our other two tests on your own. The only additional thing we will point out here is that we did not make use of any data providers, nor did we test for bad data. There was no need to, because we already took care of that in our unit test. Now, you should have a better idea of how we can lay a base of testing with our unit tests, and then get into additional testing with the kernel test. Let's have a look at the results of our kernel tests. If we run the IAI Aquifer group of tests, we will also run the unit tests we wrote previously. We will choose to run just the kernel tests. You are going to put your understanding of the power of kernel tests into use in our next video when we present your student exercise. In the last video, we learned about writing a kernel test. In this video, we will provide you with the information to write your own kernel test. You are going to test the product manager service and its one method. One of the challenges of writing kernel tests is figuring out what modules must be installed and what schema and configuration must be installed. To make the process easier for you as you learn to write kernel tests, I will provide this information. You will need to install the file IAI product, image, menu UI, and node modules. Include the following code in your setup method. This install entity schema file. This install schema file and an array with file underscore usage. This install config, an array that contains node and IAI product. Also create 3 product type nodes in the setup method with 1, 2, and 3 images respectively. In your test method, load each node and check that the retrieve product images method returns the correct information. I wish you success in completing this exercise. In the next video, we will learn about writing functional tests. In the last video, we laid out the student exercise to write a kernel test. In this video, we will explore writing functional tests. We will look at creating test data, testing positive assertions, and placing blocks. While unit tests are extremely fast, and kernel tests are quite fast as well, we saw that it is sometimes a bit challenging to write them. Functional tests take much longer to run, but are generally somewhat easier to write on account of the fact that we don't need to mock any objects, and we don't need to figure out what to install. We have a full-blown Drupal instance to work with. Let's start off by testing our controller that is responsible for generating a page that displays a particular product image. Even though we have a full-blown Drupal instance to work with, we still need to enable the IAI pig and IAI product modules. We are not making use of the setup method in this test class because we want our 2 tests to have different products. While we can create both products in the setup function and then reference just one or the other, we are going to choose to let each test create its own. We have written the controller to get some type of
Esta merda até do papel.
Ela estava aqui.
Vai até do papel.
We look for the text. The page
Vai ser isso.
when we run a test for a product that does contain an image, we won't find a text message on the page. Rather than doing an assert not contains, we will look for something that does exist. In our case, we know that the page will contain markup about the source of the image that is being displayed. Our product content
Passa a dar uns segundos para trás.
that its images should be stored. We will look at and generate somewhat easier to write on how to effect that we don't need to modify any objects. And we don't need to figure out what to install. We have a full-blown Drupal instance to work with. Let's start off by testing our controller that is responsible for generating a page that displays a particular product image. Even though we have a full-blown Drupal instance to work with, we still need to enable the IAI pig and IAI product modules. We are not making use of the setup method in this test class because we want our two tests to have different products. While we could create both of those products in the setup function and then reference just one or the other in each of our tests, we are going to choose to let each test create its own product. We have written the controller to give some type of output, whether an image is found or not. So when we run the test for a product that does not contain an image, we can look for the text on the page that tells us that the specified image delta does not exist. When we run the test for a product that does contain an image, we won't find a text message on the page. Rather than doing an assert not contains, we will look for something that does exist. In our case, we know that the page will contain markup about the source of the image that is being displayed. Our product content type specifies that its images should be stored in the product-images directory. When we use the generate sample items method, it creates an image that has a name that starts with generate image. So we are able to check that the response that a get of the page returns contains product-images/generate image. We will also look at testing the water eco actions block. In order to test this block, we need to install the IAIWBA, IAI personalization, and the block modules. Once again, we are not using a setup method because we want to be able to test when water eco action items exist and when they don't exist. If we created them in the setup method, then they would exist for every test. In our first test, we create 3 water eco action items. Then we place our block. The default settings that Drupal placed block provides are fine, so all we pass is the name of the block we are placing. After we retrieve a page, we check the contents of the page. In our second test, we expect that the block will contain the text that no eco actions were found. And now, you guessed it, it's actually time to run our tests. We will run the test for the IAI pig and IAI WEA groups. Look at how much longer it takes to run functional tests. Now that we've looked at examples of functional tests, we are ready to give you a chance to write
Ok, posso passar à frente este?
details in the next video. In the
Uma
last
lógica do outro, é um pouco diferente.
In the last 2 videos, we looked at functional tests. In this video, we will look at functional JavaScript tests. We use functional JavaScript tests when we want to test interactions on a page. We will look at using the Phantom.js browser,
O que lá depois esta série, o Phantom.js.
and testing mobile Phantom.js functionality. In our functional testing, we tested the controller that creates a page that displays an image for a product. Now, we are going to look at the block that presents the thumbnail images that open into a mobile display. In order to run functional JavaScript tests, we must run the Phantom.js browser. This browser was installed previously when we used Composer to install the testing dependencies. We will invoke Phantom.js using the suggested command that we can find in the README file in the core tests directory. Before we look at our specific test, I want to point out the fact that functional JavaScript tests extend functional tests. Once you have written functional tests, you already have a good idea of how to write functional JavaScript tests. You will just extend the JavaScript test base class instead of extending the browser test base class. To test the product image gallery block, we need to install IAI Pig, IAI product, and block. In order to be able to view the block, we first need to place it. However, this time placing the block is a little bit different because we are using a context-aware block. Using Drupal place block won't set things up properly. We need to replicate the process of visiting the block layout page and placing the block into a particular region or a particular theme. We are going to use our setup method to take care of all of the details of placing the block. Let's first test a product that does not contain an image. As with our controller, we have coded the block to provide a message when there are no images to display. So when we visit the full view page, we expect to see a product that does contain an image. This is going to give us the chance to click a thumbnail of the block and ensure that a modal opens with a large version of the product image. After we create our node, we gather some information about the image that was created. We visit our full node view of the node we created, and we check that we can see the expected clickable image on the page, and that the link contains the necessary attribute to indicate that it should open on mobile clicks. Now, it's time to get into testing interactions on the page. We will click the link we have found, and then we will verify that jQuery can find our modal. Finally, we will allow time for the AJAX request to complete so that we can verify that jQuery can find our image on the page. In order for our test to run successfully, we must either provide the schema for our block or set up protection properties for strict realistic schema defaults. You may find an example of a test setting the property defaults at modules locale tests source hello locale config manager test. To be honest, I had simply forgotten to define the schema for that block. As this is a better course of action in our case, I am including the schema in the repository now. When we run our test, we get to experience the magic of functional JavaScript testing. Isn't that wonderful? I'll configure manager test. To be honest, I had simply forgotten to define the schema for the block. As this is a better course of action in our case, I am including the schema in the repository now. When we run our test, we get to experience the magic of functional JavaScript testing. Isn't that wonderful? In the next video, you get to experience your own JavaScript. In the last video, we tested the mobile functionality of our product image gallery block with a functional JavaScript test. In this video, we will discuss your student exercise to write another functional JavaScript test. You are going to test the functionality of a tour link block. And you think of all the modules you will need to enable. Here they are: block, book, tour, and IAI product. Write a setup method that replicates placing the tour link block via the block layout page. Write a single test method to test the tour link. Create a link page. In addition to title and type, you will need to define an array key for book and assign it an array with the key of BID and the property new. Create a couple of pages that are part of this book. The pages will also in this section, we will do a series of exercises to put all of your newly acquired knowledge into practice. However, we aren't going to simply repeat things you have already done. That would be far too boring and simple for you. We are going to look at creating an ocean temperature data entity, building a listing interface for ocean temperature data, writing a validator service for our ocean temperature data, writing REST resources for get and post operations, and writing tests for our module. In this video, we are going to look at creating the ocean temperature data entity. Instead of creating a content type in the interface and then exporting configuration to create the beginning of a custom module, you are now going to start working with Drupal 8 Entity API. This made a strong argument that some of our previous custom content types should have been created as custom entities. For the sake of easing you into things and keeping things moving along, we decided not to.
Os gajos começaram tipo a cena maior e começam a formular. Isto é mais o que a gente usa aqui.
The first thing you will want to do is to make sure you have a database backup. When you are working with entities and enabling your module, you will often encounter installation errors that are hard to clean up. It can be much simpler to just restore the database. Entity API and entities are an extremely powerful part of Drupal 8. I don't expect that you're going to handle all of it in this first exercise. I will provide you with some scheduling and leave out some details for you to complete. Starting from the new module's root directory, here are the pieces I will provide in full, the info file. You have already gotten experience creating info files, and there's no reason for you to have to go through the process of creating files for you to learn more.
Isto ainda é descrição de exercício, acho, não é?
In the last video, we created our entity definition for ocean temperature data. In this video, we are going to lay out your student exercise to enhance the listing functionality of the entity. Check out the current functionality. Configure the entity to be translatable at admin/config/regional/content-language. Then visit IAI Ocean. In the last video, we created and improved. In the last video, we created in the previous videos, at this point in the course, we have done a lot of work to build our case study. Alternatively, you may have decided to jump ahead to this section to set yourself up for proceeding through the course. In either case, we have a need to create a separate environment from the one in which we will do the development work. In this section, we will look at cloning the existing environment, using a local settings file, importing changes from development to production. In this video, we will discuss cloning the existing environment. We will look at copying the database, copying the code base, and updating the setting file. Before you launch a website, there is only one environment in which you work. As is typical when launching a website, I'm going to consider my current environment the production environment, and I'm going to create a development environment from it. In order to create a new environment, we need a copy of our database and a copy of our code base. You may use whatever tool you choose to get a copy of the database. I'm going to do it directly from the command line. The name of the database I've been using is MD8D, and I'm using the MySQL dump utility to create a copy of the database. Next, I need to create a database to use for my development environment. I will name it MD8D dev. Once again, I will use the command line to read a copy of my database into the development database. By copying my current database into the development database, I ensure that both sites will have the same universally unique identifier, which is a requirement that Drupal imposes for using configuration management. With my database in place, I'm ready to copy the code base. As with the database copy and import, I'm going to choose to use the command line to recreate my entire code base in a new directory structure, which I will name MD8D dev. It is preferable that I have a separate code base and that I not do something like using a multi-site setup. While it would be possible to manage things that way, it would lend itself to a high potential of making mistakes. If this were a real-life situation, I would more likely be using version control, and I would set up the new environment by cloning the repository. The last thing I need to do is to get my development environment to use my development database. Thus, I need to update my settings.php file. I could navigate to my database settings and change the database name there. However, the change I'm going to make is to uncomment the lines that look for my settings.local.php file and make sure that they appear after my database settings. In the next video, we will look at how I set up my settings.local.php file so that my development environment functions as I want it to. In the last video, we took the first steps.
Tens que usar a física. Quando tiveres que usar a física.
We will look at examples of configuration we might set differently between production and development, creating our settings.local.php file and enabling the settings.local.php file. The reason we are using a settings.local.php file instead of changing the configuration directly in our development environment is that we want to be able to port our configuration changes from development to production. But we want some of the configuration to be different between the two environments. In other words, we don't want some of our development configuration stored in the configuration files. We override the configuration via our settings.local.php file. One important difference you will likely want to have between production and development is to change your site name to make it clear when you are in the development environment. The site name is part of the configuration of a site. We need to know what configuration value to override in our local settings file. If we navigate to configuration synchronization and choose to export a single item, we will see that one of the simple configuration types is system.site, and it's this configuration that stores the site name. Another typical change for a development environment is to turn off page caching and aggregation of CSS and JavaScript files. This information is stored in the system.performance simple configuration file. Drupal comes with an example .settings.local.php file. We might as well start out by copying that into settings.local.php and having a look inside of it. As it turns out, the file has already turned off CSS and JavaScript aggregation. And now we can see the syntax we want to use for other changes, like the site name. For good measure, we will also change the slogan. We'll finish by overriding the array that sets the database credentials. Just to reinforce the point we made at the end of the last video, we are going to return to our settings.php file and look at the lines that will include our settings.local.php file. These lines are what enables our local settings file. The nice thing about taking this approach is that if we so choose, we can make the changes to our production settings.php file as well, and there will be no ill effects. Let's have a look at our development site and see how things look. We can see that the site name and slogan have changed. If we view the page source, we will see that CSS and JavaScript are not being aggregated. Let's have a look directly through the user interface at the site name and slogan and the performance settings. Then, just to be doubly sure, let's look at the configuration files themselves. We can see that everything is still set to the production values. Hooray! We have successfully used a settings.local.php file. In the next video, we will look at how we would port changes from development to production. In the previous videos, we looked at creating separate development and production environments. In this video, we will discuss porting changes from development to production. We will look at migrating our code and capturing configuration changes. Once we launch a production site, we continue doing new work in the development environment. When things are working as we desire in the development environment, we need to move them to the production environment. The two types of changes we will need to capture are the code changes and the configuration changes. We don't generally want to capture the entire database, which will likely have a bunch of test data in it, nor would we want to overlay any new data that was created in our production environment. Generally, the way we would manage porting code would be via a version control system. We would create separate branches of our repository to use in our development environment, and then merge those branches into a production branch when they are ready. Then we would pull the production branch down into our production environment. It's definitely best practice to use version control. At its heart though, what is going on is that we are copying from a source directory to a destination directory, just as we did when we first cloned our production environment into our development environment. Only now we are doing it in the other direction. One thing that we will often need to keep in mind is whether it will be necessary to rebuild the cache in our production environment. One example of when we would need to rebuild the cache is if we injected a new service into one of our classes. Discussing automated workflows is well outside the scope of this course. We will just assume that when it is necessary to rebuild cache, you would manually do so. You would navigate to manage and extend. Then you would navigate through configuration, performance, and then click the clear all cache button. In previous videos, we took a brief look at configuration synchronization. The most straightforward way for us to port our configuration changes is to do a full site configuration export. Again, while there are automated ways of handling configuration updates, we are not going to examine them in this course. Covering configuration management is a course of its own. We will assume that we will use the web interface to import our updated configuration. Navigate to configuration synchronization and choose the import option. You will notice that you are expected to import an archive file. Once you have uploaded the file, you may view any differences in the configuration before you actually do the import. If you have made your way from the beginning of the course to this point, you may have already had a lot of experience with this porting code and configuration. If you are jumping to this section right at the beginning, in the previous videos we covered using, we spent a great deal of time creating functionality for our site. In this section, we are going to learn about changing the appearance of our site by creating a custom theme. We will look at finding a theme, managing asset libraries, organizing CSS, using JavaScript, and using Twig templates. In this video, we will look at defining a custom theme. We will discuss the info YAML file, Drupal 8's 2 base themes, and defining regions in a theme. Let's start off the process by creating a folder named MD8D inside of the themes custom directory. Next, we will create the MD8D.info.
Se quiseres acabamos isto amanhã, eu deixo-te o vídeo. Se quiseres acabamos isto amanhã, eu deixo-te o vídeo.
Description and what version of the work to use.
É a última.
Acho que é a última, sim.
É a última.
It will show up as an option in the
Ok. Isto. Sim, depois de estar a desligar, não sei o que mais, ainda vai demorar bem para ti.